Tonight, we drift into an age of quiet devotion and rising stone, when prayer shaped cities, and hands that knew the weight of earth learned to lift heaven instead. In fields where dawn broke over humble thatched roofs, there rose great silhouettes of limestone and light, growing higher each year like sanctuaries reaching toward the eternal. These were not merely buildings, but prayers made solid, forests of stone where angels seemed to breathe in stained glass glow. No king commanded them, no single mind conceived them. They were born from centuries of hope, each chisel stroke a hymn, each block a whispered offering to the unseen. Beneath scaffolds wrapped in morning mist, masons traced sacred geometry into dust, carving eternity from quarried rock while choirs sang to rising dawn. Faith lived not only in pulpits, but in every calloused hand, every lifted beam, every quiet heart that believed beauty could touch heaven. Before we begin, tell me, what do you usually do to help yourself fall asleep? Write your answer below. I'd love to read them. And if these calm journeys through history soothe your nights, feel welcome to subscribe. It keeps this gentle space alive, where old worlds continue breathing through stillness and story. In quiet valleys and mist-veiled towns, where monastery bells echoed across rolling fields and the scent of wood smoke drifted through dawn, there once stood churches heavy as earth itself. Rounded arches, thick walls, narrow openings cut like careful breaths, Romanesque sanctuaries held faith in stone like seeds in winter soil, waiting for spring. Their shadows fell upon cobbled streets in short, sturdy lines. Their halls felt ancient, solemn, protective. They belonged to a world where heaven seemed distant, veiled in cloud and mystery, glimpsed only through dim candlelight flickering against ash-colored walls. Yet in hearts of monks, pilgrims, stonemasons, and wandering scholars, a longing stirred, gentle but insistent, like morning light pressing through shuttered windows. They dreamed not of fortresses of faith, but of sanctuaries that lifted soul upward, that gathered sunlight like grace poured from heaven itself. In cloisters where novices whispered psalms, elders traced shapes in dust with chalk and trembling finger, lines that reached upward, curves that defied gravity, sacred triangles pointing toward sky. Something new whispered in stillness, not rebellion, but evolution, rooted in prayer and breathed by stone. Across Europe, whispers of change traveled like migrating swallows. In abbeys of Burgundy and Isle-de-France, in market towns along the Seine, in dusty scriptoria where tired scholars bent over vellum, a vision awakened. It came not all at once, but as gentle awakening dawn after long winter night. Arches sharpened like spears of light, walls thinned until they felt like skin stretched over ribcage of heaven. Windows widened to welcome day's golden blessing. This was not architecture alone, it was theology made visible, devotion sculpted into space. Faith no longer wished to shelter itself from darkness, it wished to invite light in. Stonecutters felt transformation before scholars named it. They noticed arch that rose more boldly when pointed, not round, weight carried upward, pressure traveling like breath through ribs. They felt thrill beneath their palms when stone responded to geometry older than kingdoms, geometry found in shells and stars and petals unfolding in spring fields. With compass and wax tablet, they marked forms drawn not from whim, but from proportion believed sacred, ratios reflecting divine order, rhythms echoing psalms sung by choirs before dawn. Builders tested idea first in quiet chapels, then in grand cathedrals whose foundations dug deep into soil, rich with bones of saints and prayers of generations. At St. Denis, in land where kings slept beneath gilded sarcophagi, Abbot Suger dreamed of church that shimmered like glimpse of paradise. Under his guidance, walls gave way to light, ribbed vaults gathered sky like open hands, and stained glass shimmered like living scripture. In jewel-bright colors, stories unfolded, prophets and angels, vines curling around halos, flames of Pentecost flickering in ruby and sapphire glass. Light became language. Architecture became instrument of grace. From that sacred birthplace, new art spread outward like rings forming on water, touched by falling star. Masons traveled with leather satchels full of compasses, mallets, waxed parchment. Apprentices followed, carrying tools wrapped in cloth and hearts filled with longing. Guilds formed, families bound not by blood but by craft and vow. They spoke in murmured Latin and rough dialects from distant villages, yet in stone they shared one tongue. Wherever they went, towns stirred, markets swelled, bells rang with deeper purpose. For when a cathedral began to rise, whole city breathed differently, as though destiny had descended upon its streets. In valleys where shepherds once guided flocks, scaffolds now climbed sky. Rope and timber lattices wrapped around stone like vines around ancient oak. Oxen dragged blocks from quarries, hooves digging earth softened by rain. Scribes traced sacred diagrams by lamplight. Monks blessed foundation trenches with whispered scripture, and noble families offered coin and land. Believing gift to church opened gates to eternal rest. But it was not kings who lifted most stone. It was hands of farmers who came in seasons of quiet, young men offering muscle, widows offering coin saved through hardship, children carrying baskets of food to workers carving angels into cornices. Each arch placed was prayer. Each keystone was hope. Each buttress leaned not only on earth, but on faith that human intention could reach upward without falling. Flying buttresses stretched like wings from nave to outer air, silent guardians balancing weight with grace, like unseen angels bearing load of heaven's vault above. Stone ribs crossed high ceilings like ribs of giant creature sleeping in stillness, a creature made not of flesh but longing, not of bone but devotion. Inside rising walls, light gathered in ways never seen before. It did not enter timidly. It poured like mercy, colored by glass into hues that danced across stone floors, dappling pilgrims' tunics and stained cheeks of those kneeling in prayer. Gold and violet, emerald and rose, a spectrum of sanctity painting mortals in tones of paradise. In that radiance, every soul felt possibility of transcendence, as if weight of life could soften, as if sorrow could lift with dust stirred beneath feet. Outside, villagers paused in fields as sunlight struck new spires, gleaming like blade drawn from scabbard made of sky. Bells rang across countryside, calling not only faithful but curious. Children who ran barefoot across grass, elders leaning on staffs, market-goers turning heads toward sound. Cathedrals announcing themselves like dawn breaking, not sudden, but inevitable, washing across hearts in waves of humble awe. Yet beauty did not rise without sacrifice. Winters bit stonecutters' hands as they shaped blocks in open air, breath freezing into crystals before falling to ground. Summers scorched backs as men hauled timber along scaffolds. Rain loosened ropes, frost cracked mortar. And still they continued, not from command, but from calling. They believed not only in structure rising, but in purpose behind each lifted stone. They saw arch not as engineering, but as ladder for soul. Window not as ornament, but opening into heaven. Tower not as triumph, but as humble finger pointing toward God. Above ground, spires reached sky, yet below, foundations sank deep, rooted in earth as trees that weather centuries. In crypts, monks lit candles near relics of saints, praying for protection over builders. Incense rose, curling upward like thin river of hope. Gregorian chant floated through dim corridors as stone echoed voices of devotion. While workers toiled in dust and sweat, cloisters held stillness where prayer balanced labor, where spiritual breath fed physical strength. Seasons shifted, leaves fell, rivers froze, flowers burst anew. Generations passed under rising vaults. Children who watched first stones laid grew old, leaning on canes to see windows installed in high tracery. Some did not live to see towers crowned with crosses. Others saw only beginnings before life called them elsewhere. Cathedral became inheritance of time, not possession of generation. Faith did not hurry, beauty did not rush. Heaven could wait. And when at last roof met sky and sunlight spilled through stained glass onto polished aisles, the town gathered in echoing nave, breath held beneath soaring vaults. Choir sang first hymn, voices lifting into ribbed arches where sound lingered like incense. Tears glimmered in eyes of those who gave years, decades, lifetimes to stone and sky. They had not merely built church, they had built horizon, carved eternity into earth, invited sacred to take form among them. Gothic was not style, it was yearning. Not ambition, reverence. It was humanity standing on threshold of heaven, palms open, heart lifted, knowing earthbound life could reach upward if shaped with patience, humility, devotion. A new world had begun, one of soaring stone and shimmering light, of faith sculpted into space so vast, it seemed to hold breath of creation itself. And thus the age of cathedrals awakened, wings unfurling across Europe like dawn spreading over mountains, promising not only beauty, but transcendence. The change did not sweep across Europe like fire. It moved like dawn, slow and tender, touching each land in its time. A chapel here, a choir arm there, pointed arches appearing first as whispers, cautious and curious, testing earth beneath them. Each one rose like a sigh released toward heaven, slender and graceful where once stone had pressed down heavy and sure. These arches did not push, they lifted. They did not wall off sky, they beckoned it inside. Monasteries tucked between rivers and hills heard first murmurs. Monks pacing cloisters traced new geometry on cold flagstones, chalk marking curves sharper than Romanesque rounds. A novice sweeping walked past and felt, though he could not name it, a stirring like spring beneath frost. Something in air shifted, not rebellion, but renewal. Quiet revolution born not from noise, but prayer. Those who traveled roads for pilgrimage told of wonders far away, of light pouring like liquid gold through high windows, of vaults ribbed like palm of angelic hand stretched above worshippers, of pillars rising like trees, branching into stone canopy overhead. Pilgrims returning from Canterbury, Cologne, charters spoke not only of relics kissed and roads endured, but of spaces where breath caught like lifting wings and souls seemed weightless. They carried stories as precious as relics, fueling yearning in towns that had never known such radiance. One by one, cities caught vision, but dreams came before stone. In guild halls smelling of dust and damp wood, master masons gathered around low tables, charcoal tracing sacred lines across parchment, circles nested within circles, triangles stacked like ladder rungs to sky. Ratios whispered through geometry like litany. A divine plan for divine place. Each line held meaning. Unity of Holy Trinity, harmony of creation, eternity mirrored in symmetry. Outside, seasons cycled. Wheat grew golden in fields, fog rested in valleys, frost kissed rooftops, rivers cracked with ice, then thawed. Cathedrals did not rise in days or months, they unfolded like centuries breathing. Yet with each new season, scaffolds crept higher, wooden ribs hugging stone as if nurturing growth. Villagers watched year after year as walls climbed, buttresses arched outward like wings embracing wind, and towers pierced sky. Evenings brought quiet, candles flickering inside half-finished naves, light dancing across rough stone. When snow drifted through open vaults in winter, white flakes settled on unfinished capitals, softening edges of emerging angels and saints. Carvers brushed snow aside, chisels ringing through cold air. In spring, green shoots grew around foundations. Summer brought dust lifted by sandals of workers, children, pilgrims, animals wandering near construction. Cathedral belonged not only to faith, but to land itself, breathing seasons like living thing. Arches multiplied. Where earlier centuries built walls, new builders opened them. Stone no longer held weight by mass, but by grace of design. Columns slender as prayer lifted vaults once supported by heavy piers. Flying buttresses leaped outward, meeting forces that once crushed walls inward. Through that partnership of tension and release, heights once unimaginable became reality. It was not brute strength but balance, echo of order believed to rule heavens. Light followed. Masons left spaces not for stone but for color, knowing glass would speak where walls once silenced sky. Workshops hummed with artisans grinding minerals into dust fine as breath, cobalt into deep blues, copper into emerald greens, gold into warm yellows that mimicked sun captured in pain. Glass melted in furnaces, poured, cooled, cut, shaped like petals of divine flower. Lead veins held pieces together, forming windows not of earth but of spirit. When set in tracery, they sang silent hymns of color. Inside rising cathedrals, sunlight broke apart into stained rainbows, falling on stone like blessing from unseen hand. Pilgrims stepped through portals and gasped softly. Though no one demanded silence, reverence came naturally, as instinctive as breath. Dust motes drifted through shafts of color, dancing slow as prayers lifting upward. Light did not chase shadow away. It entered it, gentling darkness, making sacred even the quiet gloom beneath arches. As building continued, roads around sight grew busy. Trade blossomed. Inns filled with travelers seeking glimpse of wonder. Markets thrived, selling bread warm from ovens, cheese cured in cool cellars, wool dyed rich hues. Cathedrals drew not only worship but life, economy, culture, learning. Scholars began to gather, scribes copying texts in corners near cloisters, students reading psalms beneath half-finished vaults. Cathedrals became libraries of stone, schools of light, sanctuaries not only for prayer but for knowledge long guarded in monasteries now shared with towns. Yet no matter how bustling life became around them, cathedrals felt slow within, as though time passed differently under ribbed vaults. Workers measured days by rising sun and falling scaffold shadows, not by years. They labored knowing they would never see completion, and still they labored with devotion. Some carved initials hidden on blocks for future generations to discover. Others left only the grace of their craftsmanship. Hands remembered not by name, but by beauty shaped in silence. Children grew up watching towers climb sky. Their first memories were sound of chisels tapping stone like heartbeat of earth. As adults, they would build next stage, knowing their children might follow. Each generation became link in chains stretching beyond lifetime, each hand part of prayer centuries long. Cathedrals taught patience, lesson precious as incense, humbling as psalms sung at dawn. Across regions, styles evolved. In England, walls grew long and graceful, vaults fanning like palms open in supplication. In France, facades soared with rose windows blooming like captured constellations of colored glass. In Germany, spires sharpened like quills writing praise across sky, stone lacework, so delicate it seemed painted rather than carved. Variations appeared like dialects of shared language, each cathedral unique, yet bound by same dream. And still, beneath innovation, roots remained deep. Foundations thick, crypts solemn and dim, columns rising like forest carved at twilight. Gothic did not abandon earth. It embraced earth's strength to rise toward heaven. It joined below and above, weight and light, darkness and illumination. Human and divine met not in abstraction, but in stone shaped by purpose. Carvers filled capitals with vines curling like prayer around saintly faces. Gargoyles crouched on high ledges, jaws open, eyes fierce, guardians and reminders of world beyond walls. Angels hovered in corners of portals, robes flowing, hands lifted in eternal gesture. Every surface spoke. Every carving taught. In each stone flower and saint's gaze lay world view. Life fleeting yet sacred, creation echo of divine. Every soul called upward, not by force but by wonder. Sunset came, coloring walls with warm amber glow. Scaffolds cast long shadows, workers climbing down as bells rang across valley. In busy towns, merchants closed stalls, smoke rose from hearths, mothers gathered children, farmers returned from fields. Cathedrals did not sleep, but rested. Their stones cooled. Their windows darkened, holding night sky in still frames. Yet even in darkness, they glowed faintly, not by light, but by memory of light. Faith does not dim when candles extinguish. It waits like ember beneath ash, ready to shine again at dawn. As centuries turned, more cathedrals rose: Strasbourg, Reims, York, Milan. Each one a mountain of hope carved not in haste but love. When plague came, bells tolled softly for lost, still scaffolds climbed and prayers echoed under rising vaults. When war touched land, cathedral walls sheltered frightened hearts, still candles burned before altars. Crisis did not halt creation, it deepened meaning. Mortality sharpened devotion. The frail body, seeing stone saw eternal, learned peace in brevity. In quiet evenings, as smoke curled from village chimneys and stars glittered above cloisters, cathedral sat like guardian of dreams. Builders looked up from humble cottages, saw silhouette against sky, and knew they contributed to something no death could undo. Beauty became their inheritance, faith their gift to generations unborn. In time, architects would name this style Gothic, sometimes with derision, thinking it wild, excessive, strange. But names could not diminish truth. These buildings were born of longing, lifted by love, sustained by spirit. Their form was prayer sculpted into earth, light captured like grace caught in petals of eternal flower. And so Gothic architecture spread across continent, not as fashion but as calling. It was never trend, it was testament. It rose from soil and soul together, a meeting point where humanity's desire for eternity found shape in stone. Night falls again over valley. Wind brushes high towers. Candles flicker in chapels below. Pilgrims sleep in inns. Masons dream of vaults yet to rise. Cathedral stands, unfinished, alive, breathing. For it is not building but journey, not monument but offering. And in silence beneath stars one understands Gothic was never born, it awakened, not created, revealed. A vision humanity always carried, waiting for moment when hearts were ready to lift earth toward heaven, slowly, gently, faithfully, stone by stone. Before spires crowned skylines and bells awakened valleys with hymns of morning light, there were hands, rough, calloused, steady, belonging to men who shaped dreams into stone. These were the master masons, quiet keepers of sacred knowledge, guardians of geometry older than kingdoms, and shepherds of craft that would carve heaven into earth one block at a time. While kings laid claim to glory and bishops offered blessing, it was masons who built cathedrals, not only with chisels and mallets, but with devotion that lived in every lifted stone. They did not wear crowns, nor robes trimmed in gold. Their garments were coarse wool and leather, thick enough to bear wind from high scaffolds and rough touch of quarried rock. They walked not with retinues, but with apprentices following like young birds, watching every gesture, every drawn line, every soft murmur of instruction spoken beneath rising vaults. The mason's authority came not by title carved in seal or scroll, but by trust etched in stone, earned through patience, mastery, and life spent listening to whispers of geometry and earth. In guild lodges built close to cathedral work sites, air was thick with dust and the smell of timber soaked in rain. Carpentry benches stretched long as cloister corridors, stone fragments piled in corners like fossilized snow, and in far end, where sunlight filtered through oiled parchment windows, lay tracing floors worn smooth by centuries of chalk and footfall. Here, masons knelt and drew arcs with compass of iron, lines of light and shadow crossing like stars in quiet sky. Diagrams sprawled like constellations, each mark holding dream of vaults yet unborn, arches yet unrisen, towers yet unimagined by world that walked the busy markets outside. Master masons spoke little. They needed no loud command. When they walked through sight, Workers paused, lifted eyes, awaited nod or glance. A raised hand could shift future of wall. Silent step told apprentices when curve missed sacred measure by hair's width. The master's attention was prayer, and to earn his approval was blessing. Under such guidance, apprentices learned not only craft but reverence, that building was sacred duty, not labor for coin alone, but offering to time and eternity. The guild was family carved not from blood but skill. Each man had place. The carver shaping angels whose wings curled soft as feathers upon stone, the setter laying blocks in rhythms steady as psalm, the timber master raising scaffolds with precision that kissed wind, the glassmaker grinding lapis and copper into colors that would one day breathe through windows like dawn through forest canopy. Even laborers carrying buckets of mortar and smoothed stones were part of sacred orchestra, each note needed, each movement belonging to music of creation. Hierarchy existed, but not tyranny. Master taught apprentice not only technique but humility. Stone resists arrogance, they believed, though no words spoken. The young learned by watching, how to rest hand on block as though greeting living thing, how to angle chisel so sound of strike rang true, neither dull nor sharp but pure, like bell tone across cloister garden. They studied shadows dancing along ribs of vaults already finished, seeing how light shaped surface, how curve held weight, how beauty emerged from discipline, not haste. Some apprentices entered lodge at 10, barely taller than mallet they carried. They swept floors, stoked hearths, cleaned chisels until hands cracked. Years passed like seasons turning pages. Slowly they touched compass, then cut first simple shape, square stone, smooth and honest. The day they carved first arch joint, master would watch without expression, yet heart stirred quietly beneath wool tunic. For in that moment, craft lived again, passed from flesh to flesh, soul to soul. Inside, cathedrals still growing, scaffolding rose like wooden forest, thick with ropes and ladders, pulleys creaking beneath weight of stone. Higher one climbed, thinner air grew, wind sharper, view wide as kingdom itself. Workers moved as sure-footed as shepherds on mountain path, their balance born from trust in timber and faith in craft. A plank laid across open void did not tremble, not because wood was strong, but because builders believed in hands that placed it. On ground below, clerics recited prayers for safety and guidance. Bells rang, carrying blessing across sight, mingling with ring of iron on stone. Children gathered, watching giants of wood climb sky, imagining wonder beyond rooftops. Women brought bread wrapped in cloth, wedges of cheese, warm broth steaming in clay bowls, feeding men who built monuments future generations would marvel upon. Villagers gave whatever they had, bread, coin, prayer, understanding that cathedral belonged to all who breathed beneath shadow of rising spires. Guild secrets passed quietly through hands, not scrolls. Measurements learned not in numbers alone, but feeling, fingertips brushing arc until curve sang right. Lines drawn on tracing floor glowed under lamplight, length of compasses stretching like arms of stars. Geometry was devotion, circle perfect as divine eternity, triangle holy as trinity, square steady as earth beneath farmers' feet. To lay foundation was to anchor sky to soil. To carve pinnacle was to break horizon with faith. Masons believed stone remembered touch. They turned blocks in hands like pages of scripture, reading grain, listening for voice within. If stone refused shape, they did not curse. They chose another, thanking rock for truth. To work against nature was to invite collapse. To work with it was to build forever. That was guild law, older than churches themselves, humility before earth. Seasons moved like breath. Snow whitened half-built towers, spring thaw dripped down scaffolds, summer heat shimmered on stone, autumn leaves gathered in corners where walls met dirt. Life continued beyond cathedral yard, markets, harvests, births, griefs. Yet always above, cathedral grew like mountains seeded by devotion. Some years progress swift, scaffold reaching new heights, other years slow, gold coin scarce, wars or famine delaying stone's ascent. But dream never halted. Time itself seemed to kneel before endurance of guild. When Master Mason died, lodge cloaked tools in linen, bells tolled in heavy sorrow, and body laid in earth near stones he raised. Apprentices wept quietly, not only for man, but for wisdom he carried, now resting in dust and memory. Yet even then, craft endured. Another stepped forward, compass in hand, steady and solemn, carrying lineage not of blood but devotion. Cathedral breathed again. Stone sang again. Faith lifted again. Slowly, imperceptibly, century passed. Then another. Cathedral reached for sky like vine seeking sun. Towers crowned by angels and crosses glimmered above thatched rooftops, visible for miles across fields. Pilgrims approached weeping, not from fear but wonder. They saw not building, but heaven leaning earthward, touched by human hand. And those who carved, who lifted, who measured and blessed each stone, they did not ask credit. Their names lost to time, yet their souls built into very marrow of vaults above. Every rib, every arch carried fingerprints of men who believed beauty was offering, not possession. Thus the Guild of Masons shaped not only stone, but world, teaching that greatness rises where hands are humble, that eternity can be built one breath at a time, and that devotion measured not by word or crown, but by quiet labor beneath open sky. And as dawn slid across scaffolds once more, brushing timber with pale gold, masons returned to work. Their hearts steady, their eyes lifted, their chisels ready to coax eternity from earth yet again. Years moved like wheat bending under wind, soft yet certain, and cathedral yards never slept. Dawn always found masons already at work, morning mist curling around scaffolds like incense rising in open air. The guild's lodge door creaked as apprentices filed out, carrying tools wrapped in linen, their breath pale clouds in chill. Older craftsmen followed, hands scarred but steady, eyes holding memory of stones shaped decades before. They walked with quiet dignity, as though earth itself made way for those who shaped its bones into sanctuaries of light. Not all knowledge was written. Much of it lived in gestures, in rhythm of hammer against chisel, in silence before correcting apprentice's line. When master traced circle and novice echoed curve with trembling hand, there was teaching in pause, a moment long as prayer, reminding that sacred forms were not rushed. Each mistake corrected gently, for stone forgave patience but punished haste. To build for eternity required mind tuned to slow turning of seasons, not flicker of impulse. The lodge floor bore marks of generations, half-erased lines, smoothed edges where compasses once pressed waxed boards, faint ghost of star patterns mapped in dust and chalk. New shapes crossed old, layers of memory woven like threads in tapestry. To stand in lodge was to stand inside living history, not cold and distant, but warm as breath, real as heartbeat. Apprentices swept but never truly erased marks. Sacred geometry was meant to remain, even as tracings changed. Travelers from distant towns sometimes approached guild to request guidance. Many came on foot across muddy roads, cloaks heavy with rain, seeking not charity but wisdom. They carried tokens, carved wooden animals, ribbons blessed in monasteries, simple bread tucked in cloth, hoping to earn audience. Masters welcomed not as nobles but as brethren in shared craft. They spoke few words, yet apprentices listened as if learning secrets of heavens. For when masters exchanged knowledge, cathedrals far beyond horizon began to rise in silence, their foundations laid in hearts long before stone touched ground. Journeymen moved from site to site, their lives measured not in seasons, but in vaults completed and towers crowned. They traveled in groups of 2 or 3, boots worn smooth, leather aprons rolled tightly in packs. In one town they carved angels, in another they set buttresses, in a third they traced first ribs of vault yet unborn. When they arrived, lodges opened doors in welcome, offering broth, straw bed, and brotherhood. Knowledge flowed freely among those sworn to craft, secrets shared not for pride, but so beauty would endure. They read not books but stone. A chipped edge told of haste. A smooth iris whispered devotion. Pillars spoke of apprentices' first triumph. Vault keystone revealed years of mastery. Cathedrals became libraries written not in ink but in limestone. Each joint syllable, each arch sentence, whole nave hymn carved in 3 dimensions. To walk beneath these stones was to read anthem of centuries, written by hands now resting beneath churchyard grass, yet alive in every column. Women, too, shaped cathedrals, though history seldom spoke their names. They ground pigments in dim workshops, fingers stained sapphire and crimson. They embroidered altar cloths, spun ropes for scaffolds, kneaded bread for workers at dawn, carried water to quarries when summer sun crushed breath from air, stitched garments torn by stone's bite. They sang to restless children while fathers shaped heaven above earth. Faith wove through their quiet labor just as surely as through stones rising in sky. Without their unseen hands, no vault would stand, no choir would sing. Every few years, guild tested apprentices ready to rise. Candles lit tracing floor, shadows trembling across chalk lines. Apprentices bowed heads, palms damp, hearts racing. They carved block in silence, tracing arcs, setting chisels, striking. Judges paced softly, hands clasped, eyes calm as winter river. When test ended, master lifted stone, weighing not shape alone but devotion within. If curve held faith, apprentice became journeyman. If not, years added to training without scorn, skill matured like wine in cellar, never rushed. At feasts celebrating completed bays or towers, cathedral yard filled with laughter. Tables laid beneath scaffolds, bread warm, meat roasted, jugs of dark ale passed hand to hand. Lantern light flickered across stone angels above, giving illusion wings moved in gentle breeze. Song lifted into night, not raucous but full, deep, earnest melody rising like incense. Even then, masons spoke little of grandness. They knew towers rose not for pride, but for praise. Celebration honored labor, not triumph. For triumph belonged to God, labor belonged to hands, yet hardship visited as night follows day. Rainstorms toppled scaffolds, wind snapped ropes, stone cracked where fault hidden deep within betrayed trust of line. When tragedy came, guild mourned as one body. Hammers lay still, chisels rested in folded cloth. Bells tolled low and long. They buried lost brothers near cathedral walls, marking graves not with grand markers but with simple crosses and carved mallets. Stone was their legacy, memory their monument. Still they returned, tying knots tighter, checking grain of wood twice, whispering silent blessings before climbing height. Craft taught courage not loud, but steady courage that placed foot on beams suspended above empty air, trusting timber and faith alike. Those who built cathedrals feared neither height nor time. They feared only losing reverence. To build for heaven required heart pointed upward always. Sometimes, pilgrims arrived at dusk when golden light washed facade in sacred radiance. They knelt in dust, heads bowed, believing angels perched on spires were watching. Masons watched from scaffold, sweat drying in evening breeze, and felt humility settle like cloak. Their hands shaped vision that moved hearts to prayer, but they did not claim it. They only held tools God placed in mortal fingers. When cathedral bells finally hung in towers and first great toll shook valley like thunder softened by grace, guild gathered entire town. Children sat upon shoulders, elders leaned on staves, travelers paused on roads. Bell struck again, deep, resonant, ancient though newly cast. Vibration passed through stone, through soil, through marrow. It felt as though earth itself listened. That sound, rolling beneath vaults and across wheat fields, joined past to future in single breath. Yet even completed cathedral was never truly finished. There were always more carvings, more repairs, more chapels to adorn. Time shaped stone as surely as hand. Guild remained, ever watchful, caretakers of living monument breathing centuries. Cathedrals aged not like buildings, but like souls, growing deeper, wiser, gentler with time. Even as kingdoms rose and fell, as wars marched through valleys, as famine left shadows on fields and peace returned like long-awaited spring, guild endured. It became inheritance of spirit, not profession alone. Skill passed down as blessing, knowledge guarded not with secrecy, but with devotion. Craft survived not because stone endured because craft lived. And so, as stars brightened one by one in evening sky and masons washed hands in cold basin before leaving sight, cathedral stood silent yet full, womb of faith in heart of earth, cradle for prayers not yet spoken. Vault where future pilgrims would rest weary souls beneath ribs of heaven carved by mortal mind and immortal hope. The guild dispersed each night, footsteps soft on worn path, lantern flames bobbing like small echoes of stars. Tomorrow they would return as their fathers returned, as sons would return long after. For cathedrals did not belong to day or generation, they belonged to eternity, and those who built them did not seek to be remembered. They sought only to build what memory itself could not forget. Beneath the rising spires and whispering scaffolds, beneath chant and chisel song and footsteps echoing through half-built aisles, there lay a hidden cathedral, one drawn in chalk and dust, traced in silence, and held not in stone at first, but in thought. Before any wall rose, before arch met sky or bell touched wind, the masons made a sanctuary upon the ground. It was not made of limestone or timber, but of lines, arcs and circles linked like constellations, sacred shapes pressed into earth with compass and hand steady as prayer. This secret work did not stand in sunshine for crowds to marvel at. It lay low, near the soil, as humble as seed waiting to become tree. On tracing floors, wide as cloister gardens, smoothed by centuries of footfall and reverence, master masons knelt and kneeled, their robes brushing dust, their fingers white with chalk. Here they summoned geometry as monks summoned scripture, calling forth forms believed older than language, older perhaps even than cathedral dream itself. For stone could only follow what mind first drew, and mind could only draw what spirit first glimpsed. They did not see lines, they saw light made shape. The circle, perfect and endless, symbol of God's eternity. The triangle, three sides joined like Trinity, holding heaven's secret in simplest form. The square, steady and earthly foundation of mortal world. And between them, arcs braided like prayers whispered in candlelit stalls, spirals curling like shell washed by tides, star patterns echoing music of firmament above. To them, geometry was not tool, it was worship. The chalk cracked softly beneath the compass. Boot soles brushed dust away. Apprentices watched in reverent hush, learning that each line carved space before stone filled it. The sacred ratios flowed through masters' hands as naturally as breath. Proportions whispered across generations, guarded not by parchment, but by memory and honor. No number existed merely as measure. Each held mystery. 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3. Ratios found in river bends, tree rings, human pulse, nature's equations turned wholly beneath mason's touch. Some traced forms upon wax boards in winter, when snow locked stone in silence and wind cut through half-built cloisters. In summer, they drew in sand when tracing floors grew crowded with marks. And always, geometry came first before scaffold rose, before timber bent, before hymns filled vaults with sound. For cathedrals were not stacked stones, they were crystallized mathematics of heaven, given weight through faith and patience. Nothing rushed. Lines laid with breath held, circle completed with stillness entering bones. And when master lifted compass, geometry shimmered faintly in light, not chalk alone, but idea breathed into world. Masons stood and gazed, quiet and solemn, knowing sacred form had taken shape. Then, and only then did hammers ring again, and stones rise on parchment too. Plans lived, thin as wings, delicate as spider thread, guarded in chests near altars or chained to desks in cathedral chapter houses. Priests and scribes looked upon them with awe, sensing in curves and angles a scripture parallel to their own. Monks illuminated them with flourishes of ink and gold, understanding that geometry praised Creator as surely as psalms. The lines glimmered like starlight on vellum, each mark echoing cosmic order, each notation singing order in world that often felt chaos. Cathedral walls rose not straight, but in harmony with invisible forces traced before first stone laid. Vertical lines long as hope extended skyward, meeting ribs that branched like limbs of tree reaching for sun. Pointed arches, born from compass sweep, guided pressure down slender columns, allowing walls to open like petals, not lock like fortress. And above, vault ribs converged with grace precise as bird wing meeting air, each joint held by sacred proportion, each curve alive with purpose. To walk through design was to walk through prayer. Even unfinished, geometry breathed. Workers stepping over chalk rings felt, as though passing through doorway into future sanctuary, already alive in mind of God. Apprentices kneeling at edges traced arcs with fingers, leaving trails in dust like children touching water in sacred pool. Some paused to whisper blessing before wiping line away, honoring shape before stone replaced it. And beyond tracing floors, beyond lodges and parchment rooms, nature mirrored geometry. River bends curved like apses. Hills rose like transepts lifted to sky. Honeycomb and shell echoed vault patterns. Distant stars grouped in shapes reflecting rose windows yet to be carved. To masons, creation itself taught cathedral form. They did not invent, they revealed. They believed God placed geometry in world for builders to find, just as miners unearthed gold veins or shepherds discovered hidden springs. Inside cloisters, monks studied same forms in silence, copying diagrams onto vellum, blending art with theology. They saw Christ in circle, creation in square, resurrection in arch. Geometry was scripture written without words, music heard without sound. When they sang Gregorian chant in night hours, notes rose like vault ribs, harmonies braided like tracery. Structure and sound shared soul. Every element answered proportion. Doors scaled to welcome soul yet humble body. Aisles measured to rhythm of processions. Columns placed in cadence with steps of prayer. Height rose as breath lifts in awe. Windows spread as light spreads grace. Nothing arbitrary, everything in tension. When sun pierced stained glass, geometry of light joined geometry of stone, patterns shifting across floor like luminous tapestry woven by morning. Colors rippled across carved saints, bathing their stone faces in living radiance. That light followed lines drawn years before, fulfilling promise of chalk and compass. What began in dust ended in glory, and workers felt it. Carvers touched tracery and felt pulse of universe. Mortar mixers paused to watch sunlight spill through scaffold gap, trembling at beauty their hands helped birth. Geometry was not merely plan, it was presence. When builders traced lines, they aligned earth with heaven. When pilgrims walked nave, they walked path that began in chalk circle hidden beneath floor. Invisible blueprint became visible miracle. Even mistakes held meaning. If arch bowed slightly or carving tilted, masters corrected not in anger but in reverence, brushing stone like child's hair, whispering patience through touch. Geometry forgave if hearts true. Precision served love, not pride. And though names of many who traced lines are forgotten, their marks remain in every vault. Cathedrals hold geometry like ocean holds salt, unseen yet everywhere. Step beneath arch and you step into circle once drawn by hand long since dust. Look up at vault and see triangle stretched in ribs, eternal as faith it shelters. Centuries later, scholars will measure, chart, decode. They will marvel at sacred ratios, golden section, mystical numbers humming in stone like heartbeat of cosmos. They will name what masons felt, harmony of divine order. Yet when they study, wind still moves dust in tracing rooms, and if one listens far enough back, chalk still whispers across ancient floors. For geometry was not simply used, it was believed, trusted, loved. It gave shape to longing no tongue could express. It lifted humanity from earth without tearing roots from soil. It aligned mortal breath with breath of stars. And so cathedrals rose, not randomly, not forcefully, but in quiet obedience to forms older than time. They unfolded like flowers opening in slow light, petals of stone guided by eternal mathematics, and hands that shaped not only material but meaning. When night falls across half-finished nave and moonlight cuts through scaffold gaps in silver beams, those chalk lines sleep beneath timber, waiting dawn. Geometry rests, not ended, but pausing like chant between verses. The tracing floor lies still, yet holds sky in memory. Master hangs compass upon peg, apprentice sweeps dust from arc, candles gutter out one by one. Yet cathedral continues even in dark, because design lived first in spirit, and spirit never sleeps. And as stars glide above pointed spires yet unfinished, wind breathes through open vaults, and world holds quiet around sacred skeleton of rising stone. Angels, if one believes, walk invisible lines first traced in chalk. They do not disturb dust. They simply move, knowing foundation of heaven rests where compass once turned gently in mason's steady hand. Night passes slowly over cathedral towns. Roosters call before first sun strikes rooftops, and dew clings to wooden scaffolds like beads of crystal prayer. Beneath this waking world, geometry stirs again. Dust settles on tracing floors where lines drawn yesterday sleep like seeds in winter soil, their purpose waiting patient beneath stillness. Soon, tread of boots will cross them once more. Chalk will whisper in arcs white as morning mist, and sacred forms will rise again in quiet, reverent motion. But for now, a candle flickers in Mason Lodge where one lone figure sits, studying wooden tablets etched with faint lines. These tablets are worn smooth by hands long gone, corners softened, edges darkened by years of touch. They contain no words, only curves, angles, scars of compass teeth. Each mark carries age of generations, like family heirloom passed not to children of blood, but to inheritors of devotion. In this gentle glow, geometry feels less like system, more like prayer remembered by heart rather than tongue. Sun rises softly. The first rays fall through narrow window slits and stretch across floor, illuminating chalk diagrams in pale gold. Then footsteps enter, careful, respectful apprentices arriving in morning hush. They lay wool cloaks aside, lift their compasses and strings, and with tender ritual begin again. No command spoken, no horn calling them, habit formed by reverence alone guides them. They kneel, and lines form beneath them like echoes of creation's first breath. Not every line survives. Some are rubbed away as new ideas form. Some repeat ancient shapes drawn hundreds of times before, as though memory itself insists on remembrance. The floor does not resent erasure. It knows each stroke serves something greater. Cathedrals are not monuments to permanence of shape, but to persistence of meaning, and that meaning lives in process as much as in stone. Outside, teams of workers prepare foundations for new transept or chapels. Yet even here, geometry rules. Stakes hammered into ground form grid anchored to sacred measures. Strings stretch taut like threads across loom, dividing earth by proportion. The builders honor soil by giving it order worthy of supporting heaven's rise. They measure not by whim but by harmony, each decision echoing line traced on lodge floor in silence hours before. Within rising walls, scaffolds stand like ribs, echoing the ribs they will support. Those ribs, slender stone arches crossing high vaults, began long before stone lifted. They were born in chalk arcs tested by mason fingers, judged by eye that sees not only curve but weight, pressure, grace. When a rib rises true, there is joy in it, not loud but deep, like quiet exhale that follows answered prayer. Higher up, carpenters shape wooden forms that cradle each vault arch as it grows. Wood bends to geometry's will, bowing like pilgrim's head beneath blessing. Timber creaks as hands adjust curve, shaving slivers that fall like pale petals on dusty floor. When arch stone is set and keystone slides into place with gentle thud, wood has fulfilled its duty and slowly withdraws, leaving stone to stand alone. Geometry has become structure, spirit has become body. Windows, too, begin not with glass but with diagram. Metal tracery bends according to sacred proportion, circles within circles, lilies blooming in stone, stars stretching slender points towards sky. Glassmakers study these shapes, holding parchment near furnace glow, imagining light that will one day flow through colored panes. They grind minerals into dust, melting earth into liquid radiance that cools into sheets thin as language of angels. Geometry guides how light will dance centuries beyond maker's life. And what of sculptors? They kneel before blocks rough as mountains and trace first lines with charcoal. Their forms align with geometry, not defying but harmonizing. Angels' wings curve with arc drawn by compass. Saints' faces align with golden proportions found in seashell and sunflower. Carvers do not simply decorate structure, they listen to same silent language that shaped ribs and windows. Thus stone bodies feel alive, not rigid, breathing like architecture around them. In Chapter House, clerics read scripture beside parchment plans. For them, numbers and shapes are not secular, they reflect divine order. They see scripture mirrored in stone maze of cathedral, each arch sermon, each vault psalm. When they bless new stones, they bless design that guided them. They whisper Latin over geometry, merging faith and form. Outside sacred walls, townsfolk live ordinary life, shepherds guiding flocks through meadow, bakers kneading dough, children chasing geese across muddy lanes. Yet they look to cathedral rising above roofs and feel connection to mystery larger than fields and markets. They know men of village labor within those heights. They know prayer lives in dust of carving yard. Their hearts lift each time they see tower gain another course of stone, as though their own souls climb with it. Travelers arrive, eyes wide at spectacle of structure still half-veiled in scaffolding like cocoon. Some carry relics to sell, others letters of introduction, some nothing but awe. They watch geometry breathing through construction, arcs traced in timber, lines stretched by cords, vault ribs rising in patterns echoing constellations. They whisper to one another of miracles, not understanding engineering but feeling presence. For when human hands follow sacred proportion, even those who do not know its language feel truth in their bones. As decades pass, geometry evolves. Masters refine, students experiment, guilds exchange secrets beneath cloister trees in distant towns. Tracery grows more delicate, vaults soar higher. What once felt daring becomes foundation and new daring begins. But always, geometry is servant to reverence, not ambition. Where ambition rules, stone falters. Where reverence guides, stone sings. Sometimes storms rage, winds shake scaffolds, rain runs in rivulets along walls. Geometry holds firm. Vault ribs distribute weight like branches in ancient cedar grove. Buttresses brace walls like arms supporting weary pilgrim. Foundations rest on geometry carved deep into earth, strong as faith, quiet as dawn. Storm passes, cathedral stands. Earth trembles, cathedral breathes steady. Geometry keeps its promise. Centuries will come when scholars armed with instruments and numbers will study these structures. They will measure ratios, chart load paths, analyze light angles. They will marvel at precision and genius. They will name golden ratio, Fibonacci, harmonic proportion. Yet none of these names existed when chalk first touched tracing floor. Builders did not invent theories, They listened to world, and world whispered same truth through seashell, starlight, blossoming rose, growing child, and curve of arch yet unborn. In quiet hours of twilight, when last worker descends, and scaffolds cast long shadows across nave floor, geometry remains. Dust settles, candle flames flicker, soft footsteps of monk echo down aisle. High above, ribs converge into darkness where no eye sees join but heart senses perfection. Line drawn in chalk lives now in stone vaulted above earth, holding gravity at bay like faith holding doubt. The master mason walks one last circuit, touching stone lightly, almost blessing it. He runs fingers along rib curve, feeling smoothness left by tool, listening for truth. Not triumphant, grateful, for he did not command geometry, he served it. In his steps lies humility born of knowing sacred work is never finished, only continued by hands yet unborn. Night deepens. Stars appear in windows still empty of glass, cold constellations peering through open tracery, like eyes of heaven watching birth of earthly heaven. Wind moves through unfinished arches, humming low tune like distant choir. Cathedral rests, not complete, not young, simply alive, geometry breathing beneath moonlight, prayer without word, promise without sound. And somewhere, beneath layers of dust and footprints, chalk line sleeps, waiting to be traced again when dawn returns and hands kneel to draw sacred circle once more. For cathedrals rise not from stone alone, but from geometry carried like flame across generations. Handed down, never extinguished, a language spoken in silence by hearts seeking eternity through shape, measure, and light. Before towers pierced sky and stained glass caught dawn like jewel cupped in prayer, there was stone, raw, slumbering beneath hills and quarries, waiting in silence older than kingdoms. It lay untouched for centuries, foundations of mountains and cliffs, patient as winter night, ancient as riverbed beneath Nile sand. Then one morning, at edge of forest where dew clung like silver beads, a mason placed palm on rock and listened. Stone did not speak, yet it answered. It offered itself, not as trophy, but as partner in sacred labor. Cathedrals do not begin with prayer alone. They begin with earth willing to rise. In quarries carved into valleys, men with tools worn smooth by countless seasons woke before first light. Frost glimmered on grass, mist gathered like whispered blessing over ground. Mallets chimed faintly as wedges wedged into cracks, iron kissed stone, and dust lifted in early beams. They worked not with frenzy, but with rhythm steady as heartbeat. Each strike deliberate, each fracture guided by knowledge older than parchment. Feel of grain beneath fingertips, sound of stones tremor when touched by steel. Weight sensed through feet planted firm on earth. Blocks slid along wooden rollers, ropes taut like veins under skin, oxen leaning into leather harnesses, hooves pressing damp soil. Sweat mingled with morning chill, steam rising from flanks of beasts as they pulled. Men murmured low encouragement not to beasts, but to stone, urging it along path from womb of mountain to body of cathedral. They believed stone remembered journey. Every mile etched story into mass that would later hold arches aloft. It was not just material, it was pilgrim, traveling sacred road. Timber too held purpose. Forests beyond towns rustled with life, trunks thick as pillars yet to be carved. Woodcutters wandered among them, heads bowed in reverence, choosing not by ease but by calling. A straight trunk stood like night in vigil, a bowed one whispered secret of future arch. Trees felled with prayer, axes striking with sorrow and gratitude both. Bark peeled, sap sent thick in air, rings counted like years of monk's devotion. Timber destined not for fire or fence, but for scaffolding, frame, lofting platforms, skeleton that would cradle stone until stone could stand alone. Carpenters shaped beams with iron planes, shavings curling onto earth like curled petals. Mallets tapped wooden pegs into place, joining frame without nails, joining generations with labor steady and soft. Timber lifted into sky, becoming forest above village, scaffolds rising like branches toward heaven, rope ladders swinging gently in breeze as though leaves trembling on bough. Wood groaned beneath weight yet held firm, knowing its strength temporary but sacred. When Cathedral rose fully, timber would step aside, but until then it bore world upon its grain. Tools lay along ground like relics, chisels thin as candle flame, axes broad as monks' robes, plumb bobs shining like tiers of metal suspended in air. Compass arms stretched like wings, wooden mallets scarred by years of devotion, saw teeth glinting with promise. Nothing ornate, nothing gilded. Beauty was in wear, in grooves thumbed smooth by hands no parchment recorded. Every notch held memory, winters endured, summers baked, mistakes corrected, victories quiet. The mason's tools were prayer beads of labor, counting days spent in service to dream rising beyond sight. Sand mixed with lime to make mortar, grains of ancient seas mingling with crushed shells and ash. Water carried in wooden yokes sloshed as laborers walked path from riverbank to site, wet earth sent clinging to skin. Mortar mixed in great troughs, stirred with rhythm like monks chanting psalm. When laid between stones, it bonded not only blocks but hopes, sealing them into unity stronger than any force earth alone could yield. Mortar dried in sun, pale and sturdy, invisible glue of devotion. Ladders stretched upward like ribs of ladder to heavens, narrow and swaying but trusted with lives. Workers climbed barefoot sometimes, gripping rungs worn smooth. They carried chisels tucked in belts, bucket balanced on hip, rope tied around waist. Fear felt small next to purpose. Wind at their backs felt like him. Birdsong joined chisel song, sound drifting across valley. Tools echoed faith more than voice ever could. In workshops lit by lantern glow, ironmongers hammered red-hot metal, sparks leaping like stars born for brief life before vanishing to darkness. Bellows roared, iron bent, steel drank fire. Tools born here breathed flame before breath of wind on scaffolds. Smith wiped brow with back of arm, sweat hissing as it touched metal. His craft was as holy as bishop's blessing, for without strength of steel, vision of heaven could not rise from earth. Stones arrived at foot of cathedral yard in heaps like sleeping giants. Young apprentices brushed dust from corners, revealed veins like rivers frozen in mineral. Master chose one, tapped with mallet handle, listened. Sound clear like bell, stone willing. If tone dull, stone rejected, not punished, simply returned to rest. Worth of stone judged not by size but soul. Those accepted placed on banker's bench, where carvers crouched, pressing chisel, knocking gentle first strokes like greeting old friend. Shards flew, sunlight catching particles like tiny jewels suspended in air before falling to ground with whisper. Shapes emerged slowly, capitals with vines curling, leaf by leaf, saints' robes flowing like river stone, faces serene as dawn, beasts coiled around corners. Carvers worked days on inch of detail, patience deeper than quarry bed. Their tools whispered against stone, kisses of steel leaving grace behind. Every petal carved believed to honor creation, every fold shaped to mimic divine cloth. Even those who did not carve or cut held roll sacred. Water carriers blessed stone with each splash. Rope spinners twisted fibers into strength unseen but essential. Lime burners tended fires by night, keeping flame alive so mortar might breathe at dawn. To labor near cathedral meant belonging to eternal effort. No task small, no hand unneeded. Some evenings, when work ceased and sun dipped behind hills, light brushed scaffold planks in gold thin as silk thread. Workers sat on beams high above town, legs dangling overside, gazing at horizon where stars woke one by one. Below, town fires flickered. Above, ribs of vault cast shadows long as memory. Food passed in silence, bread torn, cheese shared, wine sipped from clay cups. These men did not toast conquest. They sat in quiet contentment, watching stone become sky. When storms burst, thunder rolled across valley like organs roar before choir. Rain hammered wood, wind shook ropes, stone darkened under water's touch. Workers sheltered under canvas or in lodge doorway, watching cathedral skeleton withstand fury. They trusted structure because they trusted geometry, timber, mortar, and faith binding all. Lightning flashed, illuminating tower frame, making it glow ghostly white before darkness swallowed again. Storms came, storms passed, structure stood, promise kept. Winter's tried spirits. Frost bit fingers raw, breath thickened in air, stone felt like iron beneath glove. Men wrapped wool tight, swung arms to keep warmth, joints aching. Yet lamplight burned in windows where monks sang matins, sound drifting across yard like gentle hand pulling weary forward. After prayer, masons returned to chisels, breath clouding in lantern glow, shaping stone slow and steady as falling snow outside. Spring returned life. Grass sprouted near walls, birds nested in scaffold joints, lilies nodded near cloister. Warmth returned elasticity to wood, strength to arms, song to air. Bells chimed Easter morning, tone trembling through unfinished nave, echoing promise carved into every arch. Death yields to rising, darkness yields to dawn, effort yields to vision. Cathedrals rose not only from stone and timber, but from seasons repeating, centuries turning, patience enduring. Tools dulled, sharpened, dulled again. Hands aged, bones stiffened, sons replaced fathers. But the dream did not tire. Timber lifted until stone stood alone. Stone stood until heaven rested in its vault. In this grand labor there was no boast, only steady humility. Stone came from earth, timber came from forest, iron came from fire, and all returned to silence beyond centuries. Yet while they endured, they carried breath of eternity. When night at last enveloped sight and stars glittered like glass shards above unfinished towers, workers walked home along paths of trampled grass. Their shoulders ached, hands rough, clothes dust-stained, yet hearts light. Behind them, cathedral bones glowed faintly in moonlight, timber limbs stretching to heaven, stone muscle resting under cloak of dark. Tomorrow they would return with mallets and ropes and hope. Tomorrow stone would rise another inch. Tomorrow timber would hold weight one day longer. Tomorrow tools would ring once more. And someday, not soon, but surely, structure would stand complete, light pouring through windows where now only wind passes. But work was not burden, it was offering. Time itself was their scaffold, and eternity their final stone. And so under watch of moon and whisper of wind, cathedral slept, dreaming of form to come, walls yet to breathe music, pillars yet to cradle sky. Timber creaked softly in night breeze, stones cooled, tools rested like tired saints. Creation paused but never ceased. For where stone waits, and timber leans towards sky, and tools shine faintly in starlight, cathedral lives, even before its first prayer rises beneath finished vault. Morning returns again, soft as breath on cool glass, touching scaffold wood with pale gold. The first to rise are not priests or nobles, but those who build, the stone bearers with shoulders hardened by winter, the timbermen with sap still in hair from forest days, the blacksmith whose forge glows like sunrise before sun itself arrives. Their steps crunch frost, their cloaks whisper, and soon sparks leap once more from anvil like tiny sun spirits fleeing darkness. Work begins not with a shout but a rhythm, ancient as plow and tide. Wooden wheels creak beneath stone, ropes tighten, hoists groan, chisels strike in measured cadence. Dust lifts in morning air like pale incense, drifting up between future pillars into space where vaults will one day cradle choir song. Though voices murmur and wood snaps, sound remains gentle, devotion has its own quiet pulse, slower than battle, deeper than festival, steady as heart of earth. Stone arrives from distant quarry, each block carrying memory of journey. Rain may have fallen on it near river crossing, oxen may have stumbled on slope, hands may have steadied load during storm, These marks do not weaken stone, they sanctify it. Labor is not tarnish here, it is blessing. And when block meets sunlight on Cathedral yard, it glimmers not from polish, but purpose. At banker's bench, carvers bend again to work. Their bodies sway slightly with rhythm of tool, breath aligning with each strike. A bud forms first, suggestion of life beneath mineral. Then curl of leaf, vein delicately traced, wing feathered along edge. They work not as artists seeking fame, but as gardeners coaxing beauty from sleeping seed. Stone resists at first, but yields under patience, revealing softness hidden in hardness, reminder that even the strongest things in creation harbor gentleness within. Timber cranes, framed with heavy beams and pinned by wooden pegs, rise like skeletal giants beside walls. Their arms swing slow, lifting stones skyward. Ropes coil like sleeping serpents at workers' feet until called into motion. Men tug, muscles taut, boots gripping earth, weight transferring from ground to pulleys to rope to stone. No chain rattles, no engine roars, only rope creak, breath hiss, quiet command of gravity obeyed. When stone reaches height, hands reach to receive it, guiding block into place with tenderness unexpected in such rough forms. It rests, as if sighing into position, edges aligned by wooden mallet taps as soft as lullaby. Mortar mixed again, stirred by wooden paddles in trough darkened by years of lime breath. Steam rises when water meets powder, like spirit released. Mortar glistens wet like clay beneath river, fertile, ready. When trowel spreads it along joint, layer thin and pure, stonemason smooths surface with patience. His thumb passes a long line as mother smoothing child's hair. Craft here is affection, not conquest. Blacksmith wipes sweat though dawn cool still lingers. He lifts glowing iron strip, beats curve for new chisel, tempering edge in water that hisses like whispered amen. Sparks fall to dirt floor, tiny stars extinguished in dust, yet memory of heat lingers. Without his fire, tools would dull, strength would wane, stone would resist. He does not climb scaffolds nor carve angels, yet every arch owes him breath. Every saint in stone carries his flame in lines of robe and curl of wing. And there are others, countless, unseen by history, yet essential. Sand carriers whose feet are white with lime dust, stirring mortar through days' length. Rope braiders in workshops twisting hemp strands into cords strong enough to cradle tons. Wheelwrights coaxing timber into round dream of motion. Quarry boys fetching water to cool chisels. Women mending tunics torn by edge of block or splinter of beam. Hands moving with quiet grace near hearth. They are threads woven through cloth of cathedral, never singled yet never absent. Above, carpenters stand upon beams high as treetop nests, measuring curve of roof truss against sky. They speak in gestures alone, trusting wind as messenger. Their beams lock in place with mallet sound like heart knocking on ribs. When two timbers join perfectly, silent smiles cross weather-worn faces. Structure grows from faith in wood's truth, grain that holds memory of forest, strength bent but not broken by storm. Carpenters read this memory. They do not fight it. They guide it toward purpose. Day warms. Walls stretch upward, flying buttresses lean outward like wings opening for flight. Tracery begins to lace future windows, delicate stone veins awaiting glass heart. Some panes already cool on racks in workshop, deep cobalt like evening sky, crimson rich as rose after rain, amber warm as candle flame. Glass takes weeks to birth, fire forging sand into jewel. When held to sun, each sheet glows like fragment of dawn. Light yet to come sleeps inside these colors, patient as monk at prayer. Inside nave, shadow pools cool and deep. Pillars stand like ancient pines, their surfaces faintly scarred by chisel teeth, waiting smoothing that will come when final stone laid. Sawdust gathers near carpenters' platforms. Stone chips rest like snowfall in corners. Scents mingle wood sap, lime, iron heat, wool from workers' tunics. earthy incense of labor blessed by faith. Time stretches like beam under weight, long, slow, patient. A decade passes. Children once running under cart wheels now climb ladders with buckets. Old hands retire to cloisters, fingers curled like roots after lifetime in earth. Masters die, apprentices rise. Voices change, tools past, but rhythm persists, chisel, mallet, breath, prayer. No day begins without sense of joining something older and larger than self. And sometimes near sunset, when walls near height of tallest pines and scaffolds cast shadows long as town streets, a hush settles over yard. Work ceases not by order but by instinct. Tools lowered, men stand still. They look upon outline of cathedral taking shape against sky, roof yet unclosed, tower yet unspired, but form present, sure. They see in stone arches curve of divine thought, in timber ribs promise of vault yet to cradle stars. The future breathes through unfinished walls. Evening bell tolls. Workers descend, hands rough, backs aching, spirits alight. As they depart, timber cranes stand motionless, ropes slack, stone blocks waiting next dawn. Cathedral skeleton darkens as sun sinks, and shadows settle as cloak across rising face. Yet one last glow lingers where glass fragments catch final daylight like memory of fire. Then night embraces everything. Moon rises. Stars scatter thin above scaffold crossbeams. Wind hums quiet hymn along half-built aisles. The cathedral sleeps, body incomplete, yet soul fully born. Each tool resting nearby, the chisel, the rope, the mallet, gleams faintly as though remembering warmth of hands. Stone cools, timber sighs softly, dust drifts unseen. The builders lie in beds or haylofts or cottages near river, dreaming not of wages but of walls growing like living prayer. Some dream of arches spanning space between earth and heaven. Others dream simply of sunlight on stone. Yet all, whether knowingly or not, dream same dream, that through their labor, world will hold more light, more hope, more quiet awe. Cathedrals rise not because stone lifts, but because hearts lift first, daring to believe the sky is not boundary, but invitation. Under night's watch, unfinished spire points into darkness like question asked gently, without urgency. A question as old as longing, as quiet as devotion, as certain as dawn. And when morning arrives again, tools will wake, ropes will tighten, chisels will ring, stone will answer. For cathedrals are not built only by strength, nor by cleverness alone, but by patience, by humble hands moving in harmony with time, by belief that beauty is worth centuries, by trust in stone, in timber, in iron, in sun and rain and seasons turning. And above all, by faith that what rises slowly endures longest, and what is shaped with reverence becomes eternal. So the work continues, soft and strong, until one day, far beyond lifetimes of those who lay first stone, choir light will spill across nave floor, bells will sing from towers, pilgrims will kneel beneath vault carved from earth and sky. And those who built will rest beneath grass outside, nameless yet remembered in every beam and arch. Their tools will rust, their bodies fade, but stone will hold breath of their devotion, and timber will remember their touch. And centuries later, when travelers enter cool hush of finished cathedral and lift eyes in wonder, a whisper will pass through marble and glass, through rib and buttress, through light itself. This was made by hands that believed in heaven. When stone first meets sky, it does so shyly. A single course laid atop another, nothing more at first than a promise resting on earth. But promises, when tended with patience and sacred intention, grow. And so the walls rose, not in leaps, but in layered whispers, each block placed as though blessing the last. Morning light slid across new-set stone, warming faces of those who lifted, pressed, aligned, and stepped away with hands dusted like bakers after kneading bread for pilgrims. These walls did not simply stand. They leaned toward heaven, learning its language one breath at a time. Along narrow walkways suspended above ground, Masons moved with grace that belied weight they carried, balancing tools and memory, stepping across planks that bowed beneath them. They climbed and descended as the sun arced across sky. Their bodies followed rhythm of day, but their hearts followed rhythm of eternity. Where others saw wall rising, they felt doorway forming, a passage for light, for sound, for prayer. Every stone set was a note in hymn not yet sung. Below, shadows pooled in naves growing belly, cool and deep, holding silence like water in stone basin. Children peered inside from edges of scaffolding, imagining giants would one day walk this hall. Women bringing baskets of bread saw future as if already present. Candles shimmering beneath arches, voices rising like doves, pilgrims kneeling where dust now settled. They could not yet trace ribs of vault, but they felt them already, as a seed feels tree though still buried. High overhead, Master Mason lifted compass, tracing arc in air before marking line along timber template. Apprentices held breath watching, for in that arc lay destiny of sealing. Vault would spring from curves like wings from bird breast. The curve must be true, not only to law of gravity, but to law of beauty, which guides gravity gently. No force alone could lift vault so high. It required harmony, stone leaning into stone, weight shared, pressure traveling down columns like blessing moving from crown to heart. Pointed arches grew where round ones once ruled. They reached upward with a yearning ancient as psalm, meeting at keystone like two hands clasped in prayer. Beneath them, air changed. It felt lighter, stretched, waiting to be filled by music and incense and whispered petitions. Arches did not block, they beckoned. Their shape made space for ascent, physical and spiritual both. Then came ribs. At first they lay on tracing floor in chalk and string, simple as child's scribble. But when raised, they transcended sketch and became bones of heaven. From pier to pier they sprang, slender yet strong, meeting overhead in lattice woven like branches of orchard arching to cradle morning. Where ribs joined, carvers placed bosses, flowers blooming from stone, saints' faces emerging, vines curling around center like life's circling source. Each boss marked joining not only of stone but of spirit. The ceiling became spine of faith. Workers guided ribs into place with ropes and wooden frames, sweat trickling under tunics. They muttered prayers in breath between heaves, not in fear but reverence. Rope strained, timber creaked, then suddenly stillness. Keystone settled like final note of chant, resonance humming through scaffold and bone. Vault held. No cheer arose, only quiet awe, like when dawn breaks and world inhales before songbirds dare begin. Outside, villagers looked up to see vault curve emerging against sky. No roof yet covered it, only ribs open to heavens like bare framework of night's celestial dome. Clouds drifted between arches, wind slipped through, rain sometimes fell directly onto mortar not yet cured. But builders did not mind. Creation and weather worked together. Storms tested strength, sun kissed surface dry, night cooled joints slow and steady. Nature joined labor, patient companion to human devotion. Flying buttresses stretched their arms outward like guardians leaning into wind. They counted thrust of vaults, bearing burden not by dominance, but by partnership. Stone learned to balance, to trust. Gravity became ally, not enemy. Buttresses stood not inside, but outside, silent watchers beneath open sky, their delicate arches holding weight of worlds. Travelers marveled, some believing angels truly rested above, pushing down soft with wings to keep walls upright. In truth, it was geometry and prayer, but who could say difference when both flowed from same source? With vaulting begun, walls soared higher. Window openings widened, tracery carved lace into their bones. Light waited beyond, patient, knowing soon stained glass would gather it like cupped hands gathering spring water. Sometimes workers paused to watch sunbursts slip across unfinished edge, casting long shadow across town. They imagined future beams bending through ruby and sapphire panes, blessing stone floors with quiet rainbows. These visions fed them more than bread. Timber frames supported vault while mortar set. They rose like cage of forest branches, intersecting, cradling ceiling tenderly. Wood groaned under strain, but never broke. It understood duty. When scaffolds creaked, workers ran hands along beams, listening for fatigue like shepherd listening to sheep's breath in night. They strengthened joints, wedged new supports when winter wind howled. For months, timber bore heaven before stone claimed it. Down below, crypts waited. Damp air lingered, candles flickered, dust lay thick along carved capitals of pillars half lost in gloom. Yet even here, ribs of vault above cast faint pattern, promise of sky descending into earth. In crypt, monks walked slowly, chanting low psalm as fingertips brushed cold stone. They felt connection zone where mortality met eternity, where rising and grounding held hands. Years passed as walls climbed, ribs met, buttresses anchored. Seasons cycled across surface of stone. Rain streaked it, sun bleached it, frost kissed it, moss whispered in corners where shade lingered. Workers aged, apprentices grew into masters, children who once watched from field edges now hefted mallets themselves. Cathedral rose not in haste, but in lineage, one generation lifting platform, next lifting vault. Sometimes famine delayed progress. Sometimes plague emptied scaffolds for months, silence pressing heavy as winter snow. But walls waited, patient. Stone did not resent pause, devotion only deepened. When work resumed, it felt resurrection. Bodies weary but hearts aflame with gratitude for second chance to build toward heaven. From hilltop mile away, traveler approached and saw cathedral take form, ribs arching, walls rising like cliffs carved by divine fingertip. Town clustered below like nest at foot of mountain. Smoke curled from chimneys, fields rippled with wheat, river shone dim silver under dawn. Above all, skeleton of vault stretched against sky, bold and impossible, yet there, proof of what patient hearts could lift. Inside, where vault nearly complete, sound changed. Footsteps echoed longer, breath lingered, chisel struck stone and tone traveled far up into ribs and returned like blessing. Air felt different, alive, expectant, resonant. A whisper could carry as if carried by wings. It was no longer mere construction. It was becoming sanctuary, womb of spirit, cradle of prayer. As final stones placed, scaffolds removed one beam at a time. Gaps opened, light streamed through, dust fell gently like first snow on winter morning. Vault revealed itself fully for first time, ribs interlaced high overhead, stone petals meeting at carved keystones. Workers removed hats, heads bowed, not from order but from awe. They saw heaven resting in stone where once there was only earth. Night settled. Stars pierced darkness above arches. Wind threaded through open clerestory, humming faint like lullaby. A bat drifted quietly through nave, wings brushing twilight. Grass outside wet with dew. Town slept. But cathedral remained awake, dreaming of choir yet to sing, candles yet to burn, souls yet to kneel beneath soaring ribs. No roof crowned it yet. No tile sealed rain from vault. But already in darkness and echo it felt sacred. Already, those who entered moved slower, spoke softer, sensed something vast breathing above them. Though still growing, cathedral had heart, and heart beats even before birth is complete. By dawn, workers returned, lifted tools, resumed labor. They walked beneath ribs, touched stone as greeting. Their task far from finished, roof, spire, glass, carvings, pavement, but vault stood. Heaven had been invited and it had accepted. Walls would rise higher still. Towers would climb like prayers unending. But this meeting of stone curves, this cradle of space that made spirit lift, this was moment cathedral learned to breathe. And breath would carry through centuries, through war and famine, through silence and song, through crumbling and repair, through generations unborn. It began here, with walls rising and vaults unfurling like wings catching first wind of eternity. The vault stood, complete yet waiting, like a heart formed before its first beat, a lung shaped before first breath. Above it, open sky shimmered through wooden ribs of temporary frame, clouds drifting between arches as if blessing stone with silent procession. Workers stood beneath bones of heaven they had coaxed from earth, gazing upward, dust still clinging to hair and sleeves, bodies weary yet spirits lifted. For when vault closes against gravity and holds, the world shifts. A place once of soil and timber becomes realm poised for sacred breath. Now came the roof, not simply shelter, but crown. Carpenters moved like dancers across beams spanning space above vault, feet sure upon narrow timbers, palms rough with splinters earned through seasons of shaping forests into sanctuary. They lifted rafters fashioned from oak, older than kingdoms, their arcs echoing curve of vault beneath. Wood met wood with soft thud, mallet guiding joint into union tight as clasped hands. Pegs slid home, locking branch to branch, forming skeleton that would bear slate like knight's armor guarding heart beneath. Rain often came, sudden and silver, running along unfinished roof like blessings spilled too soon. Workers worked still, cloaks heavy, hair slick, boots slipping on wet beam yet gripping with stubborn care. For even rain was welcomed. It tested, baptized, blessed. Sometimes they paused to watch drops fall from arch to earth far below, hearing them strike stone faintly like soft applause from saints not yet carved. When storm passed, sun returned, catching droplets that clung to ribs in glittering halo. Light itself seemed apprentice here, learning where to fall. Beneath rising roof, stone vault glimmered pale and solemn. Workers climbed scaffolds within, smoothing joints, carving final bosses, brushing dust from curves where mortar cured slow as winter patience. They ran fingers along lines, feeling breath of centuries in shapes drawn long ago. A master placed palm upon keystone, held it there, eyes closed, lips soft in silent gratitude. No speech made, only offering from heart to stone, from mortal to eternal. Outside, buttresses stretched wider to hold roof's thrust, each arm of stone gripping earth with reverence, each pier rising like sentinel carved from dream. Flying arches leaned outward, fingers supporting invisible weight as gently as parent cradles child learning first breath. Their grace defied hardness of rock. They appeared too slender to bear world, yet bore it with ease born of wisdom. Travelers arriving from distant roads stopped, breath caught in chest, unsure whether they gazed upon building or miracle. Seasons turned. Snow settled along timber beams, collecting in quiet drifts before workers cleared it with patient sweep. Ice clung to ropes, hands numbed, breath froze in night air. Yet vault did not waver. It held sky even under weight of winter's silence. When spring thawed frost, scaffolds dripped, and grass pressed green against stone footings, promise renewed. Children ran past, marveling at towering walls that seemed to scrape sky, their laughter echoing softly between pillars like bells not yet cast. Inside, with vault complete and roof sealing heavens from rain, darkness breathed differently. Shadows deepened not with emptiness but expectation. Air grew hushed, cool, reverent. Workers stepped more softly, hearing each footstep multiply softly against stone. When chisel struck, sound leapt upward, danced along ribs, lingered like hymn fragments suspended in air. This space had learned resonance, like instrument newly strung, waiting for music. Carpenters built walkways along high cornices. Stone carvers knelt upon them, chiseling friezes of saints and seraphim gazing down at future faithful. Some carved vines curling along ribs, leaves unfurling in eternal spring, proof that even stone yearned toward life. Others shaped faces solemn with wisdom, features smoothed by devotion more than by blade. Dust gathered in hair and eyelashes, but eyes shone, for they worked in twilight of holiness, where every strike echoed eternity. Workers below began laying pavement, fitting stones like puzzle whose pieces remembered ancient riverbeds and mountain flanks. Each slab placed by hand, sand sifted, edge tapped, until seam disappeared. When first sunlight entered clerestory, it wandered across floor still rough in places, tracing journey ahead. One day, feet of pilgrims would follow same path, seeking solace, whispering prayers, releasing burdens to stone that listened without judgment. Along Triforium, carpenters built railings, slender balusters carved with patience of monks copying scripture. Their wood warm beneath fingers, bearing grain like stories of forest before axe touched bark. Above, roof slates hammered into place lined horizon with shimmering scales. At dawn they glowed, at dusk they sighed cooling breath. When wind swept across ridge, slates hummed faint tune, joining whisper of wind through sculpted tracery. Then came lead, sheets rolled across timber frame, sealed with hand-pressed seams, waterproof skin embracing cathedral like armor against centuries. Under lead, vaults slept warm, protected from storm's fury. Workers traced seams with mallets tapping rhythm older than language, soft thuds drifting down like heartbeat of sleeping titan. Rain fell soon after, sliding from peak in streams, water shedding like tears of joy denied entry. Vault remained dry, bones embraced by shelter crafted by loving human hands. Light filtered through unfinished windows, dappling dust, catching motes swirling like spirits playfully dancing in sacred womb. Builders watched beams move across surfaces as day turned, marking hours in streaks of gold and pearl. Sometimes they paused to watch, letting light rest on faces, warmth softening fatigue etched by years. They understood that one day glass would tame this light into color, blooming across nave like garden eternal. Night descended often before day's tasks finished. Torches flickered from walls, flame halos trembling as breeze slipped through half-sealed roof edges. Shadows danced across ribs in patterns like angels moving along vault. Workers lingered, reluctant to leave. They descended ladders slowly, touching stone as farewell, boots echoing along aisle as though each step a small benediction. Below ground, crypt cool and still accepted first carved sarcophagi, resting places of benefactors whose wealth helped raise stone, their names etched modestly beside images of lamb, cross, or chalice. They sought eternity not through marble splendor, but through building that would shelter prayers for centuries beyond breath. When spring returned once more, green vines crept against outer walls, tender shoots seeking warmth of stone that seemed alive. Bees hummed near wildflowers blooming at foot of buttresses, unaware they danced in shadow of structure that would outlast mountains. Pilgrims arrived even before completion, kneeling on ground, hands pressed to unfinished wall, feeling pulse of something greater than architecture. As roof neared completion, bells hung temporarily in timber frames in tower gap, and first toll rang across land. Its voice low, trembling, imperfect, like child speaking first word, yet full of promise. Villagers paused mid-plow, shepherds raised heads, merchants held breath mid-call. Sound settled in valley like blessing carried on wind. Cathedral had spoken for first time, though still growing inside. Vault fully enclosed now reflected sound softly, cradle of echo waiting for chant, hymn, prayer, silence. Builders stood beneath, hats held over hearts, eyes lifted. They heard nothing but faint rustle of sawdust and sigh of breeze. Yet they knew this space was not empty, it was full of future. Each stone, each timber, each iron spike held memory of labor, breath of devotion, echo of faith. Roof timber darkened slowly in age of sun, rain, frost, wind, holding firm above stone ribs. Day after day, wood swelled, dried, tightened, held shape like heart holding promise. Birds nested under eaves, feathers drifting occasionally through clerestory into nave. Swallows darted above vault, as if consecrating air with winged prayer. In time, scaffolds began to lower. Planks removed, ropes untied, timber frames carried away. With each beam gone, cathedral revealed more of itself, stepping from cocoon into sky. Workers walked aisles with naked wonder, seeing arches no longer hugged by wood, ribs soaring naked and strong. They felt both pride and humility, for though human hands shaped stone, it now stood beyond human strength. When final scaffolds stripped away and light poured uninterrupted to floor, silence descended. Even birds hushed. Cathedrals breathe longest before first prayer rises. In that stillness, space felt infinite, weightless, like dawn holding breath before sunrise breaks horizon. In that moment, builders knew they had not raised structure, they had lifted spirit. Night came. Moonlight streamed through unfinished windows, falling across ribbed vault in pale silver. Stars glimmered above roof ridge like jewels set in crown. Town slept, but stone did not. It listened to wind, to river, to nightingales, to beating hearts dreaming near hearths. Cathedral began belonging not to builders but to time. And those builders, lying beneath blankets in huts and cottages, dreamed not of stone but of light. For they knew, walls and vaults endure not because they resist time, but because they hold eternity within shape carved by love, lifted by patience, sealed by hope. Thus rose walls. Thus lifted vault. Thus roof embraced heaven's measure. And thus cathedral stepped into life, ready for windows to ignite, altars to breathe incense, voices to fill sacred air. Yet for now, it rested, whole in body though still gathering soul, a quiet mountain born from hands that believed earth could touch sky, and sky could answer. Long before the first pane glowed like a jewel in the heart of stone, before color learned to dream in cathedral air, glassmakers woke in darkness to coax sunrise from sand. Their furnaces roared in little workshops near riverbanks, flames blooming gold inside brick walls as if they themselves carried secret dawn. Within clay crucibles, mixture of sand, ash, and crushed stone melted under heat fierce enough to melt stars. It churned like molten honey, thick and bright, waiting to be born into form. Those who tended fire moved with slow devotion, faces ruddy in glow. Their tools simple, wooden paddles, hollow reeds, iron shears, each worn like trusted prayer beads. The breath they blew into molten globe gave glass its first soul, expanding glowing sphere in soft exhale as calm as monk at prayer. Light was not invited. It was forged, coaxed, persuaded to settle inside clear skin of earth transformed by flame. Color began not as pigment in paint, but as metal dissolved in fire. Cobalt for blue deep as twilight between stars. Copper for green cool as forest after rain. Gold for red warm as ember beneath incense ash. These minerals blended beneath roaring breath of bellows, heat folding them into molten body, until the mass shimmered with hue older than words. No painter could claim such color. It belonged to fire and patience alone. Glassworkers lifted glowing sheets from furnace mouth with long paddles, spreading molten surface like silk pulled across loom. In air, heat rippled like mirage, and edges cooled to gentle curve. Bit by bit, sheet flattened, thinned, hardened, clearing as if air itself washed through it. When cooled, glass held faint waves like quiet water touched by wind, imperfection born from craft, beauty born from human breath. Each sheet bore subtle memory of maker's pulse. Meanwhile, high in cathedral walls, stone frames already waited, lattices carved with delicate branches, circles nested in circles, pointed petals radiating from center like flower born from geometry rather than seed. These skeletal windows hung empty as eyes dreaming of sight, longing for light's arrival. Each curve drawn long before stone rose, each opening carved as promise. Builders touched tracery edges softly when passing scaffold, as though greeting friend not yet awake. When first glass arrived, wrapped in coarse cloth, builders gathered like pilgrims around relic. They held sheets to sky, turning each so sunlight passed through, revealing breath of fire still sleeping inside. Colors cascaded, crimson like heart's secret flame, blue like depth of prayer, green like spring's gentle return after winter's long vigil. No voice broke stillness, or spoke enough. Glass gutters worked inside cloister workshops, where narrow windows cast pale beams onto benches stained with pigment dust. They scored sheets with diamond-tipped stylus, snapping pieces with care that felt like blessing, each shard shaped by memory of pattern drawn on parchment. Petals, wings, stars, faces, all emerging under steady touch. They were not merely craftsmen, they were midwives of light. Lead strips softened in furnace were bent into channels, ready to cradle glass in embrace secure yet tender. Lead flowed in their palms like river guides bending course of stream. They pressed glass pieces into place, fitting each small jewel into lattice of metal. Panel grew slowly, like tapestry woven from light alone. Solder fused joints, smoke rising in lazy spirals. Tools clinked gently, no harsh noise to disturb sacred labors. Painters worked next. Their brushes dipped in powdered minerals mixed with wine or oil. They traced halos, shadows, folds of robes, eyes bright with devotion. Hands moved in strokes delicate as whisper. Paint tinted surface, shading life where color alone could not breathe full truth. They laid glass into kiln very like small chapel of fire. Flames licked edges, softening paint into permanence. When glass emerged, it radiated not as object, but as vision. In Cathedral, scaffolds rose again, not heavy timber for vault's birth, but light frames reaching toward window arches. Glaziers climbed with panels wrapped in canvas as acolytes hold sacrament. They fitted each piece into waiting stone ribs, pressing lead gently, securing with wooden tool carved smooth by use. Sun ignited glass in their hands as they worked, washing faces in colored glow. For a moment, heaven brushed cheek like warm breath. At first, light came thin, crawling through narrow slits as if shy of sacred enormity within. Then more panes filled space and beams deepened. Morning entered in sapphire hush, midday blazed gold across nave, evening sank crimson along choir stalls. Light turned hours into symphony, each tone new, each moment born only once. Dust floated like drifting stars, catching all hues, dancing through air warmed by color. Soon, stories awakened in windows, prophets standing tall in crimson robes, martyrs crowned in azure, angels with wings unfurling in emerald, saints holding lilies, books, swords, flames. Scenes unfolded, annunciations whispered through soft gold halos, new life rising in gentle white, judgment and mercy wrapped together in violet mystery. Each figure not portrait, but prayer made visual, truth for those who could not read scripture, yet read light by heart. Children crept inside when doors opened, their bare feet silent on cold stone. They stared upward wide-eyed as sunrise poured emerald across their cheeks, blue into their hair. They stretched fingers toward floating motes, trying to pinch color from air. Mothers watched, smiling soft, knowing even if words failed them, light would teach souls what faith could be. Carvers below paused often to watch sunlight shift across tracery they shaped months before. Lines they carved with sweat now drawn in fire across floor. They felt not pride but thankfulness. Stone had found its companion. Shadow and light danced in arch recesses, cloister pillars, rib curves, baptizing stone in radiance. Walls that once seemed heavy now glimmered, alive like water touched by sun. Priests walked aisles in silent awe. They traced crosses slowly, not from ritual alone, but response to light that seemed to breathe scripture without need of chant. Their sandals whispered across flagstones, robes brushing quiet melody against still air. Even they, guardians of word, bowed before language of glass, color speaking in silence to heart where tongue could not reach. Seasons changed. Summer sun flamed through rose window, casting petals of ruby across nave like fire blooming. Autumn brought wan gold, soft amber resting on pillars like harvest blessing. Winter light pale, feathered, entering like quiet pilgrim. Snow outside reflected through blue panes, making interior glow as though underwater in holy sea. Spring burst emerald, tree buds mirrored in glass vines curling in tracery. Wind pressed against walls, rain streaked lead edges, frost kissed panes fragile yet strong. But glass endured, held firmly by stone arms and lead embrace. Day after day, century after century, it continued breathing light into shadow, patient as prayer carved in stone. Cathedral now breathed differently. Light shaped air into presence, tangible, gentle, sacred. It did not merely illuminate space, it sanctified it. Where beams fell, time slowed. Steps softened, thoughts quieted. The world outside, muddy roads, market shouts, winter hunger faded. Here all belonged to eternity, and beneath that colored grace, workers continued carving, polishing, sweeping dust, laying last stones, fitting last timbers. They labored in light of their own creation, though they claimed no ownership. When ruby fell across face, they looked up humbled. When azure touched their hands, they paused as though grateful for blessing. They built cathedral, but cathedral built them as well, shaping their spirit, taming hurry into patience, sharpening pride into reverence. When final panel set in lofty arch, glaziers climbed down, eyes damp not with sorrow but with awe. They had placed last jewel in crown of faith, and sunlight surged through, unrestrained, like him finding voice after centuries muted. Bells rang that morning, each chime scattering across color-bathed nave like sound turned into radiance. Cathedral, once skeleton of ambition, now breathed as living soul house. Its walls no longer held only stone, they held dawn. They held heaven spilling into earth through panes of fire-kissed sand. And as shadows stretched that evening and moonlight traced pale silver over cooling stone, a quiet truth settled. Faith does not end when structure stands. It begins when light enters. The night held cathedral gentle in darkness, but even then windows glimmered faint under moon, faint like embers still alive in hearth of world. For where light once lived, it never fully leaves. And so glass waited for morning, dreaming of sunlight that would once again pour into ribs and aisles and hearts below, turning space into miracle with every breath of day. When the last pane had settled into its stone cradle, when the lead lines cooled and the final solder seam hardened in silence, the cathedral did not merely gather light, it began to breathe it. Dawn entered as a pilgrim, humble at first, peering through east-facing glass with curiosity, spilling thin ribbons of gold and rose along the floor. In that first quiet moment when night withdrew and day hesitated, cathedral interior glowed as if remembering creation, a soft birth of radiance where darkness had once lived sovereign. Slowly, morning deepened. Sun climbed, and light poured through fiery reds, heavenly blues, serene greens. Color flowed not like water, but like blessing, patient, purposeful, clothed in silence. It touched each stone rib as though greeting old companions, brushed carved faces with warmth like gentle fingers laying grace upon brow. Dust drifted through beams, dancing as though carried by invisible choir song echoing from distant time. The scenes within glass began to awaken under sunlight. A saint's robe shimmered, an angel's wing glowed with featherlight purity, a prophet's gaze brightened with unspoken truth. Not painted stories, but living windows, they lifted hearts toward mystery without forcing understanding. Farmers, monks, merchants, any who stepped inside stood humbled by color carrying meaning older than script. Light became teacher, painter, priest all at once. Stained glass did not simply fill voids, it tamed the sun into prayer. Outside, fields lay harsh under summer glare, roads shimmered with dust, and wind bent wheat in restless waves. But inside, sun softened into jewel tones, turning heat into warmth, brightness into peace. It felt as though time itself slowed when glass sang with light. Hours moved like drifting petals. Footsteps sounded distant, as if walking within memory instead of world. And yet, even in such grace, work continued. Carpenters built choir stalls, carving wooden canopies that rose like miniature spires within greater vault. Sculptors chiseled saints' garments to fold like river cloth in stone. Mortar dust still clung to tunics, clay still stained fingers. But where once they labored in shadow, now color washed over them, turning brown wool into crimson, gray stone chip into emerald dust. They became part of canvas they shaped, touched by sacred pigment not from palette, but from heaven through glass. Outside, travelers approached from distant villages. They had heard whispers, not of stone or height, but of light. Pilgrims walked barefoot along forest path, leading children by hand, carrying bread wrapped in cloth. Shepherds paused on hillside, watching sunrise catch spire and turn it to gold. Light atop tower called them, quiet as star beckoning sailor home. They entered through great door, hearts beating with awe, and found themselves submerged in color like pearls sinking into sea of holy fire. Some knelt, not from obligation but from wonder. Light crossed their faces like gentle waterfall, shadows wrapped around them like ancient cloak. They felt small yet held, seen yet sheltered, humbled yet lifted. This was no ordinary building. This was a lantern for souls, an ocean of radiance contained in stone, a place where God and sky and earth conversed through brightness that needed no voice. Even when clouds gathered and rain washed roofs slate silver, the cathedral did not dim. Light entered softened, pale and luminous, as though sky wept pearls instead of water. Grays and blues turned tender, subtle hues blooming where once fire burned. Rain tapping lead roof brought rhythm like rosary beads against wood. In that gentle gloom, candles awakened, their flames flickering amber among cool shadows. The mingling of fire and glass made soft magic, man's flame and God's light weaving together like spirit and breath. When winter arrived, snow settled upon stone like blessing fallen from silent heaven. Days shortened, sun low and thin. Frost feathered window corners, ice traced delicate veins along lead frames, echoing patterns of vines carved in limestone. Light grew pale, silver-white, almost fragile. Yet in that restraint, glass revealed another face, one not of triumph, but of patience. Color did not blaze, it whispered. The cathedral felt like resting angel beneath cloak of stillness. Even in winter's hush, beauty lived, deep and steady as root beneath frozen earth. Then spring returned. Buds swelled along trees lining churchyard, and light came back with laughter in its steps. Gold brightened, green deepened, rose flushed walls. Birds perched on stone tracery outside, their feathers illuminated like miniature stained glass fragments given wings. Inside, walls glowed fresh as morning dew on meadow. Light seemed younger, playful, as though remembering the world's first dawn and offering it again. And always, the glass endured. Storms battered roof, wind howled through buttress arches, seasons changed with bold strokes. But lead held, stone protected, faith preserved fragile pane. Workers climbed on festival days to oil putty seams, mend tiny cracks, replace weather-worn panes. They worked slowly, lovingly, aware that to repair glass was to touch centuries. They pressed lead gently, murmuring prayers, hands reverent as priests at altar. Color once again sealed against storm, once again ready to catch sunrise. Within cathedral life unfolded. Children baptized at stone font gazed at light like glimpse of heaven. Old men leaned upon canes beneath radiance warming fragile bones. Monks chanted, their voices weaving with shafts of sapphire. Brides walked aisles dusted with ruby shimmer, veils glowing like clouds backlit by dawn. Coffins carried through nave glimmered faint violet, hint of eternal twilight beneath vault. Life and death passed through radiance, each touched by color. At times, beams fell directly upon altar, making linens shine white as mountain snow. Other times they spilled across choir stalls, gilding wood with honeyed bronze. Even darkest corners received gentle caress, soft green trembling on floor, faint blue caught in creases of carved stone cloak. Light spoke to every surface, every grain never forgetting any space. Nothing was too humble to be touched by grace. The builders themselves aged. Hands that shaped tracery now shook. Backs once straight upon scaffold bent slow. But when they entered Cathedral and saw morning burn through rose window like living sunrise, they felt youth again, not in body, but in soul. For they had not only carved stone, they had carved light's home. They had not only lifted walls, they had lifted sky down to earth. In final years, some came just to sit in quiet, letting colors pool around feet and shoulders. They breathed in silence made alive by radiance. Their eyes misted not from sorrow, but from knowing their labor did not fade. Glass shone generation to generation. It would shine when their names forgotten, when grass grew above graves where they rested. Their legacy was not inscription, it was illumination. And so stained glass became Cathedral's heartbeat, pulsing with sunrise, resting at dusk, singing at noon, whispering at twilight. It was not decoration, it was revelation. Through it, heaven bent close. Through it, earth lifted upward. Through it, time paused long enough for souls to glimpse eternity. When a child pressed palm to colored floor, feeling warmth of light on skin, future continued. For through every pain, hope descended. Through every beam, grace ascended. And as long as sunlight returned, Cathedral remained alive, breathing, remembering, offering. Even now, centuries beyond first pane set into stone, stained glass still glows each morning as though new. Travelers enter and stand silent, stunned by beauty not invented but discovered, ancient rainbow held captive only to be freed across stone each dawn. Light remains faithful. Glass remains patient. Stone remains steadfast. And in the hush beneath vault where color falls like soft rain from heaven's edge, hearts still rise. Not by effort, but by grace unfolding in luminous quiet. That is stained glass gift, to turn sun into prayer, time into wonder, and ordinary mortal breath into chorus of eternity. Before coins ever clinked in offering bowls or patron seals pressed into wax, before royal charters blessed holy stone or bishops traced foundations with silver staff, there was a village, small, humble, breathing in rhythm with river and field. There were shepherds rising early to drive sheep through misted dawn, bakers kneading dough in dim hearthlight, woodcutters sharpening blades beside frost-brittle logs. And in hearts of these quiet souls lived a dream not lifted by pride nor pressed by command, but born of longing, to raise a house for heaven where earth might touch eternity. The cathedral did not belong to bishop alone, nor guild, nor crown, but to every soul whose footsteps beat soft rhythm on its future stones. It began as whisper among community, as shared breath when bells of small parish church trembled with song, but could not contain devotion swelling like tide beneath moon. This new house would rise not only by will of rulers, but by yearning of many hearts, each offering something, even when pockets held little more than seeds and hope. Coins gathered slowly, copper earned by millers, silver saved by merchants, pennies given by widows with trembling hands but steadfast faith. Pilgrims passing through left what they could, believing coin placed toward rising stone became prayer in material form. Children dropped pebbles into wooden chests, not knowing worth but knowing gesture. And each offering, humble or grand, wove itself into fabric of future walls. Wealth did not build alone, faith did. Nobles pledged land, fields that fed workers, forests whose trunks would become scaffold and beam. Some gifted quarries where stone slept in ancient calm. Monasteries gave blessing and book knowledge. Abbots loaned scribes and parchment. Nuns embroidered altar cloths in cloister gardens as sparrows hopped along cloister walls. Kings granted charters in halls bright with flickering torches, while bishops walked cathedral site barefoot at dawn, blessing earth before first trench cut. But the true strength lay not in privilege, but in common hands, in farmers who, after long toil under sun, carried baskets of turnips to feed hungry carvers. in fishermen who walked miles to bring river catch, in mothers who filled pots with broth and herbs to warm masons worn thin by winter, in children who fetched water, gathered straw, held tools as apprentices. Work and worship braided like reeds in riverbank basket on feast days, bells rang and people gathered beneath rising shadow of half-built nave. They prayed not only for stone to stand, but for snow to spare crops, for sickness to pass homes, for sons to return from distant battles, for daughters to find gentle future. The cathedral, even unfinished, became heart of life. Markets unfolded near scaffolding, carts creaked over cobblestone, herb sellers cried wares, shepherds traded fleeces. But always, glances drifted upward toward stone rising like mountains slowly revealed as fog lifts. Pilgrims arrived, drawn by whispers of wonder, not yet stained glass or soaring spires, but faith so deep it turned earth to vision. They slept on straw in barns near town, ate simple porridges offered by kindly hands, left tokens at small shrine near construction. Some bore relics, a bone encased in glass, a thread from saintly robe, and townsfolk believed such holy remnants lent blessing to future vault. Pilgrimage roads widened, inns prospered, and villages blossomed around promise of sanctuary rising. At harvest, when fields golden like sun's last breath before winter's hush, townsfolk came with wagons full of wheat. They brought first fruits to priests, who blessed grain and fed laborers who carved arch stones. In return, masons offered prayer for good thresh, safe winter hearths, fattened flocks. Exchange flowed both ways, bread for stone, blessing for bread, care for care. Community did not stand apart from cathedral. Community was cathedral. Monks walked town lanes offering chants for safety of scaffolds, lifting voices like lanterns in dusk. Lay brothers brought medicines brewed from herbs gathered near cemetery yew, treating scrapes and fevers, easing stiff backs and split knuckles. Priests preached from wooden platforms when naves still open to sky, calling farmers and craftsmen to remember that building stone alone did not build house of God. Hearts must rise too, in patience and humility. Sometimes, when funds thinned or war drained coffers, building slowed. Dust settled, chisels rested, scaffolds quieted. Worry crept like frost along eaves of cottages. Farmers whispered near hearths, wondering if dream might fade. Yet hope did not break. It bent like reed in wind and then rose again. Wealthy merchants pledged coin saved through years of steady trade. Guilds offered labor free for fortnight. Noblewomen donated jewelry melted into silver candlesticks. And simple folk placed handfuls of nuts or small loaf into charity bowl, not knowing whether such modest gifts mattered. Yet believing they did. Feasts held yearly to honor workers filled square with fragrance of roasted meat, warm ale, spiced bread. Musicians played lutes beneath hanging lanterns. Children danced barefoot. Laughter drifted through air soft as autumn smoke. And when night deepened, torches lit rising stone in warm glow, making half-built nave appear complete beneath cloak of dancing flame. Eyes glistened. For a moment, vision of cathedral in fullness flashed not before stone, but within souls who believed. Donations came not only in coin but in time. Old men unable to lift stone sat beside scaffold weaving rope or sorting iron nails. Widows embroidered kneelers, their stitches prayers for children long gone. Young boys swept dust from cloister, learning reverence by broomstroke. Bakers delivered bread each dawn for hungry apprentices. In such giving, labor became love, and love became foundation as strong as limestone bed beneath pillars. Every cathedral stone carried fingerprint of ordinary lives. Each block lifted bore weight not only of limestone, but of hope. That hope held fast through famine, plague, rainstorms that drowned mortar, fires that licked at timber yards, and quarrels between church and noble that paused building with angry decree. Through all, people remained, whispering that one day vault would ring with chant, and sunlight would bloom across floor like meadow in spring. Masons carved initials beneath stones never seen by eyes again, quiet signatures of gratitude for having been part of holy labor. Shepherds carved crosses into bark of oak felled for beams, blessing wood before axe fell. Children pressed small flowers between pages of scribes' books, hoping they might be found centuries later and prove that innocence too played part. Faith etched itself not only in architecture but in invisible acts. When relic arrived, a saint's fragment bone carried from distant abbey, procession wound through streets. Bells rang, incense lifted, voices rose. Workers paused chisels and climbed down to kneel as relic passed beneath incomplete arches. Even stone seemed to hush. Such relics blessed sight again, not granting magic but unity, bringing hearts together in single breath. Night often wrapped scaffolds before tasks ended. Workers lingered on ledges high as swallows' nests, looking down at flickering hearths scattered across town. Smoke from chimneys curled like prayers rising. Dogs barked in distant alleys, and mothers called children in. Builders felt connection, their stone rising not to stand apart from life below, but to honor it. This church would cradle newborn laughter, hold funeral sorrow, witness weddings, watch peace treaties carved in dust of isle. It would outlive wars and droughts, bless harvests and departures, hold memory when memory of builders faded. Funding was not transaction. It was devotion poured through generations. Those who gave wealth did not buy glory, they joined communion. Those who gave coins gave equally to those who gave strength. Those who gave prayer gave most of all. And so, community moved like river around cathedral bones, feeding its roots while drawing nourishment from its growing form. They believed, without needing proof, that a house built by many hearts would shelter many souls. They understood that stone needed spirit as earth needs rain, and they gave, not because commanded, but because beauty demanded participation. When evening fell and workers returned to cottages, bells tolled vespers from small temporary chapel near sight. Villagers paused in fields and lanes, bowing heads as stars appeared faint in violet sky. In quiet hum between bells, cathedral walls glowed pale, touched by last ember of sun. Children leaned against parents, gazing upward. They did not see scaffolds or cranes, they saw rising heaven. And though walls unfinished and vault yet echoing with memories of hammer and rope, cathedral already lived in heart of village. It breathed with them, bled with them, rose with them. Stone was body, people were soul. Neither could stand alone. In that gentle truth, the night embraced town. Smoke curled, stars shimmered, and half-built cathedral cast long shadow across resting earth, promise carved in silence by many hands, destined to lift their prayers long after fields lay harvest empty and winter returned again. Stillness settled, but dream did not sleep. It simply waited for dawn when feet would return, coin would ring, bread would warm cold hands, and ladders would rise once more into sky. As years folded into one another like pages softened by faithful hands, the cathedral's growing silhouette became part of the land's memory. Seasons turned around it like pilgrims circling shrine. Wheat bowing gold beneath summer sun, snow dusting buttresses in winter hush, spring blossoms scattering petals like blessings across scaffolding planks. Each passing year, the people lived with the cathedral as one lives with sky, always above, always becoming, always a horizon to the heart. There were mornings when frost clung to rooftops and workers stamped cold feet before ascending wooden ladders slick with dew. Housewives stood in doorways pulling shawls close, watching lantern lights bob along scaffold paths like wandering stars at dawn. Bakers slid loaves from ovens, steam curling from crust like prayer rising, and wrapped warm bread for masons to share upon high beams. Life below breathed life above. The town awoke with the cathedral, rose with it, slept in its shadow. Dawn bells rang soft, not from lofty tower yet, but from humble temporary belfry near sacristy shed. Their tone flat, small, earnest, nothing like soaring chime to come, yet heard as promise. Bells did not summon simply prayer, they summoned purpose. Men tightened belts, women tied aprons, children slung water pails over small shoulders, and step by step, the road between village and building yard wore smooth beneath devotion. Markets blossomed in the cathedral's shadow. Stalls of cloth, barley sacks, salted fish, painted icons, simple toys whittled from birch set against low wall. Peddlers called gently, farmers bartered beside tethered mules, monks browsed for herbs to steep in cloister infirmary. Vendors looked not inward, toward coin box, but upward, toward ribs and pinnacles, as though selling beneath heaven's unfinished roof lent grace to trade. Children wove between legs clutching honey cakes, pausing to watch carvers chip angels from stone, eyes wide as gilded halos. Charity bowls sat near scaffolds, not guarded by guards but by humility alone. Copper and crumbs fell within, crumbs for birds, coins for stone. No voice judged value, no face measured generosity. Those with little gave little, those with more gave quietly without parade. A noble might slip pouch of silver beneath coarse cloth, a shepherd might offer wool, a widow might bring single candle stub. All belonged in equal measure to rising house, for all hearts equal in heaven's reckoning. It was said that each stone knew name of giver, even if no record inked it. A myth, perhaps, yet when masons laid block, some touched it gently first, whispering gratitude for hands unseen that made it possible. In this quiet honoring, stone grew sacred long before consecration altar ever kissed oil. At Feast of Harvest, townsfolk gathered with fullness in arms and hearts. Oxen lowed near gate as carts arrived heavy with apples, barley, smoked meat. Tables set along cloister wall laden with pies and cheese and tender bread still steaming. Workers, weary yet proud, washed hands in fountain before sitting to eat among those they served. Children sang simple hymns learned from monks. Dogs wandered hopeful between benches, and laughter rang like bell tone through scaffolds overhead. When winter darkened fields and frost rimed window edges, the cathedral yard did not fall idle. Workers patched cloaks with wool, wrapped feet in leather, drank broth seasoned with herbs brought by village healers. In bitter wind, torches sputtered and snow drifted along buttress feet, yet chisels still struck stone. Breath hung in air like incense, cheeks raw from wind, fingers stiff yet sure. Some seasons, plague crept through town, dark and heavy as storm cloud. Work paused then, not from choice but sorrow. Priests walked lanes with holy water, women tended kindling at sickbeds, windows shuttered, prayers whispered. Scaffolds stood empty beneath pale midwinter sun, and stone waited, as patient as God himself waits for returning sinner. When plague passed and bells told thanksgiving, community emerged changed yet resolute. They returned to scaffold not merely to build, but to heal. Carpenters lifted beams as though lifting those lost. Monks brought balm not only for wounds but for grief. Mothers dressed children in fresh linen and led them to chapel to light candles. Such candles flickered in winter gloom, like souls star-bright in shadow. And work resumed, each stroke of mallet not merely craft but remembrance. Sometimes distant wars consumed king's treasury, and funds promised for vault stones diverted to knights' banners. Coins thinned, scaffolds stilled, yet townspeople did not fault king nor curse heaven. Instead they gathered in barns at night, spinning wool together by oil lamp, each offering thread to church weavers. They baked loaves to sell in market for cathedral fund. Children performed small plays, lantern-lit, retelling stories of saints and miracles. Coins dropped into wooden bowls at end. Slowly, quietly, treasury filled again like rainfall gathering in hidden well. Journeymen from other lands arrived, drawn by rumors of beauty rising here. They brought new chisels, worn aprons, accents from far valleys. Guild welcomed them not as strangers but as brothers. They carved side chapels, repaired broken scaffolds, shared tools if apprentice lost his. They found lodging in homes of townsfolk who offered straw mattress by hearth and bowl of pottage at supper. Hospitality flowed not from wealth, but from kinship formed by shared dream. At Festival of All Souls, lanterns glowed in every window. Families walked to churchyard with bread and apples, placing them upon graves. They prayed for departed, believing souls near. That night Cathedral glowed from within, hundreds of candles bathing unfinished nave in honey-gold light. Workers paused chisels to attend vigil. They stood shoulder to shoulder with farmers, merchants, nuns, weavers, children, each holding candle, each flame reflecting in stained glass with trembling reverence. Cathedral breathed with light of living and memory of dead. In such moments, no one doubted sanctity of labor. Slowly, prosperity returned. Banners hung during feast days, musicians rested under arches to play viols while merchants traded spices. Pilgrims came bearing embroidered relic bags from distant monasteries. Town grew around cathedral bones, houses multiplied, mills turned ceaseless by river, vineyards planted on gentle hillside. Yet through change, Cathedral remained steady, heart beating slow and deep. Sometimes storms arrived fierce and sudden, wind tearing across fields, lightning striking tower scaffold. Workers descended, sheltering in cloister. Thunder shook ground, rain hammered lead roof. Yet when storm passed, rainbow arched over emerging spire, colors faint but holy. Children pointed, believing promise made in sky meant safety for stone and town alike. And truly, Cathedral endured, shaking off storm like lion shakes dew. In long summer evenings after day's toil, workers sat along low wall, legs dangling, sharing tales. Mothers rocked babies in crook of arm, fathers carved whistles from scrap wood for sons. Grass smelled sweet, swallows darted, smoke drifted from hearths. Some gazed at Cathedral as sun bled through rose window, bathing facade crimson. They did not speak their pride aloud. It lived quiet, content in chest, steady as heartbeat. When spire finally crowned vault, townspeople gathered to watch gilded cross ascend into blue sky. Rope creaked, pulse quickened, children gasped. As cross reached heaven's line, bells rang, real bells now, hung within tower, deep and full. Their voice rolled across valley, through wheat fields, across river, into hills where shepherd leaned on staff and whispered prayer. Tears glimmered in some eyes, hats removed, knees bent. The highest point of dream touched heaven at last, but community did not disperse. Cathedral finished stone by stone, window by window, yet life continued to weave through its doors. Births blessed beneath carved angels, vows exchanged beneath arch of heaven, dead carried into quiet crypt where stone spoke comfort in silence. Markets thrived, children grew, fields turned golden again. The building stood not as end, but as beginning, anchor for generations, still point in turning world. The people who built did not wait for history to name them. Their reward was not inscription, but belonging to time larger than self, to faith deeper than spoken creed, to beauty that outlived season and sorrow. They gave with calloused hands and open hearts because giving transformed them. Stone shaped faith, but faith shaped lives. And when finally night fell on final day of labor, and last scaffolding plank removed, and dusk poured lavender through windows, Cathedral stood complete, yet still breathing community's breath. Its stones warmed by centuries of palms, its floors polished by feet of farmers and lords alike. Its air held laughter of children, weeping of mourners, chants of monks, sighs of weary returning home from fields. It was not monument, it was family made solid, memory made architecture, hope turned into house. Torchlight flickered long after moon rose. Inside nave, candles burned as if stars had descended. Villagers drifted home as night deepened, lanterns in hand, leaving Cathedral glowing alone under heaven's great arch. Yet it did not feel alone. It held their footsteps, their offerings, their stories. Their love lived in mortar joints, in tracery curves, in every carved petal. And in the quiet between midnight and dawn, when owls watched from cloister rafters and only river whispered beyond town walls, a gentle hum seemed to linger, not from organ, nor wind, nor bell rope swaying. A hum born of years of hands and hearts, a choir made of gratitude, echoing not in air but in stone, so cathedral stood, and community rested, and stars wheeled slowly above. Together they dreamed, for what one built, the other inhabited, what one shaped, the other sustained. And so the night passed, and with dawn came first light through stained glass, awakening world anew. Time does not rush a cathedral, it gathers around one. Long after the first chisels struck limestone at dawn, long after the earliest ropes frayed beneath the strain of lifting hope skyward, the work continued, not as fevered effort, but as steady prayer. Days turned to seasons, seasons to years, years to lives. Generations rose and vanished like mist along the river, but the walls kept growing, rib by rib, tower by tower, dream by dream. Children who once played at foot of scaffold grew to carve stone atop it. Old men watched grandsons climb where they once clung, breath catching not from height but from memory. Births, marriages, funerals, each marked time in village heart. Bells tolled softly for each, echoing through open nave, rolling across fields like low thunder murmuring eternity's nearness. Sometimes they tolled not for life, but for celebration. The placement of keystone in high arch, the completion of a vault, the raising of tower lantern. Men wiped mortar dust from brows and women clasped hands in prayer, knowing each milestone carved another verse into song of stone. Yet even while towers rose, time wrought weathered marks upon their base. Moss settled into cracks like gentle shroud, rain kissed limestone with silver tears, winter carved fine veins of frost along buttresses. Cathedral aged as it grew, and in that paradox found beauty, always becoming, never finished, forever in breath between heaven and earth. Crows perched upon spire lattice, as though keeping vigil, black against blue. Their cries carried far, haunting and proud. Histories unfolded around foundation. Kingdoms rose and faltered, flags changed, alliances wavered, kings knelt before altar to seek blessing for war or peace. Once, a monarch entered with retinue of steel and velvet, crown gleaming like morning sun on river. Trumpets blared, incense clouds drifted thick. Yet when he stood beneath vault and looked upward, grandeur humbled him. For stone built by hands unknown to power bowed to no crown. Even king seemed traveler then, brief passer in shadow of eternity's architecture. Sometimes conflict trembled through land. Raiders crept near valley, armor glinting like teeth. Villagers fled to cathedral walls for refuge. Torches flickered along ramparts hastily built, but aggressors never stormed holy ground. Instead, war passed like dark wind, snapping banners, shaking confidence, but leaving stone untouched. After danger lifted, citizens returned to fields. Mason's hammer rang once more in cold morning, steady as dawn returning after storm-swept night. There were years of famine when rivers ran thin and bread scarce. Workers left scaffold to mend plows and gather last grain before frost. Cathedral stood still in half silence, its rising towers like hands halted mid-prayer. Yet not abandoned, only resting. When harvest returned good, songs returned to worksite, and mortar mixed once again with laughter. Hunger could slow dream, but never empty it. For dream held more than bread, it held hope. Plague visited again, and again silence filled nave. Candles burned for lost, bells tolled low, names whispered through cloister like leaves falling in autumn wind. But survivors returned, touching stone as though touching memory, smoothing chisel along block as though smoothing grief. They built not only for God and future, but for those now gone, whose sweat once mingled with theirs. Cathedral became memorial, and in stone they carved remembrance deeper than grief could erode. Centuries passed in layered breath. Architects succeeded architects, each leaving trace like calligrapher, adding flourish to divine manuscript. Some extended transepts, some set gargoyles on cornices to watch centuries pass beneath them. Gargoyles, weathered faces grotesque yet oddly gentle, became sentinels of rain and laughter. Children pointed at them, half afraid, half in awe, believing they came alive when moon hung full. And perhaps in some sacred sense they did, for cracks around their mouths looked like time-worn smiles. Scribes in cloister copied sacred texts by candlelight, their quiet scratching a hymn to knowledge. Ink-stained fingertips, wax dripped onto parchment, silence deep as winter night held them. Outside, masons shaped stone, carpenters carved choir stalls, glaziers replaced cracked panes. Inside, monks breathed prayer into every breath they took. Cathedral lived both in labor and stillness, balanced like great arch on keystone of devotion. Pilgrims crossed mountains to stand beneath vault, their walking staves worn, cloaks mud-stained, feet blistered. They whispered wonder when sunlight burst through rose window, painting cheeks in rubies and sapphires. Some fell to knees, some stood silent, tears tracing dusty faces. They left small offerings, brass tokens, rosaries, sprigs of rosemary, folded letters sealed with wax kissed by trembling lips. Each offering tucked into chapel corners, quiet as dewfall. As centuries marched, storms came fierce. Lightning forked like white fire across sky, striking tower spires. Stone groaned but held. Wind roared through cloisters like ghostly choir, rain hammered roof like drums calling armies. But cathedral endured. Fires sparked once or twice, licking beams beneath great roof. Yet townspeople rushed with buckets, human chains stretching from river to nave, quenching flame with desperation and love. The building survived not by strength alone, but by loyalty of hearts entwined with it. Snow settled thick some winters, muffling sound, blanketing spire like funeral shroud. Yet as sun rose pale behind clouds, crystals caught faint glow, turning roof to silver altar beneath sky. Children made angels in drifts near buttresses, monks swept paths with care. Life went on beside grandeur, ordinary and sacred intertwined. Bread baked, wool spun, cattle driven to thawed streams. And rising above all, cathedral reminded each soul that earth touches heaven in quiet ways. When time softened stone edges, when lapsing centuries blurred sharpness of tracery, new workers came to mend and preserve. They studied marks left by ancestors, learned from mortared seams, read lessons in each weathered block. Restoration was not erasing past, but embracing it, sealing cracks with reverence, replacing broken carvings with homage to those original hands. Even tools carried lineage, chisels passed down, wooden mallets darkened by palms of grandfathers and fathers, grains smoothed by decades of grip. One master mason, old as winter oak, walked aisle at dusk, tracing pillar with gnarled fingers. He murmured not in lament but in awe, for he had seen boyhood beside first buttress and now beheld finished vault golden in twilight. His life arc traced alongside cathedral's rise. He knew names of workers long buried, remembered laughter on scaffold, tasted bread shared beneath half-built arch. His heart beat slow but deep, in time with stones he loved. And when he died, villagers placed his chisel and mallet near altar, not relics of saint, but relics of devotion. They lay there like offerings for eternity, symbol of labor sanctified by patience and humility. His name carved small on stone near cloister, not to claim glory, but to whisper story to future. Ages shifted. Empires rose and vanished, armies marched, banners shredded, crowns traded heads. Yet cathedral remained hushed witness. It saw new languages spoken beneath its vaults, new prayers uttered in old shadow, new hymns breathed through ancient air. It adapted without surrendering soul. Wooden pews polished smooth by centuries of devotion, iron hinges worn by countless hands, candles burned down to stubs beside chapels where lovers knelt to promise faith. Scholars came, tracing geometry in arches, marveling at math hidden in prayerful stone. Artists sketched buttresses, poets wrote verses beneath rose light, musicians tested acoustics with soft lute chords that rang like silver threads across stone tapestry. Cathedral welcomed each, not as spectators, but as inheritors of beauty once formed from sweat and vision. Even when modern time came with noise and haste, Cathedral held stillness like lamp hidden from wind. Cars hummed past, trains screamed afar, electric lamps glowed, yet entering nave remained stepping into river of peace flowing backward through centuries. Feet slowed on cool flagstones, voices gentled, even children quieted, sensing something older than world they knew. And so, Cathedral lived, not finished, for no cathedral ever truly finishes. Time continues carving it, wind continues shaping, devotion continues filling. What began as foundation trench cut in humble soil became testament of centuries layered like folds of vestment. It did not merely survive time. It cradled time, held it, sanctified it. Generations who gave copper, muscle, breath, though dust now, speak still through stone. Their prayer persists in arch curve, in vault height, in rose fire, in quiet of midnight nave. Theirs is legacy not chiseled name, but echo of faith carried forward. For Cathedral is not monument to past, it is promise to future, whisper of eternity caught in net of stone and light. And in every quiet footstep on worn slabs, in every flicker of candle flame trembling against saintly glass, in every bell toll drifting over valley, one truth lingers like incense rising. The hands that built have vanished, but what they built still breathes. When the cathedral at last stood whole, spire crowned, vault sealed, windows gleaming like jewels cut from morning itself, the world around it continued to turn slowly, endlessly, guided by seasons of nature and seasons of the soul. But the cathedral did not remain still. Though its stone appeared firm, unmoving, it lived within time, breathing with each generation that passed beneath its arches. Completion was not an ending but a beginning, a threshold through which centuries would walk. In its early fullness, the cathedral saw throngs of pilgrims crowd its steps at dawn, cloaks brushing frost from grass as they approached trembling with devout hunger. Some arrived barefoot, shoes slung by rope across shoulders, believing earth beneath sacred ground deserved direct touch of skin. They whispered prayers at threshold, tracing crosses on stone worn smooth by thousands of earlier hands. To enter was not simply to step inside a building, it was to step into heaven's waiting room. Chant rose each morning, deep and resonant, filling nave with sound that shimmered like incense through air. Monks moved in slow procession, robes rustling like leaves in a solemn forest. Their voices layered one atop another, low hums, high threads, weaving sonic tapestry that clung to ribbed vault high above. Sunlight struck windows, and saints formed from glass bathed in gold, their faces serene as dawn. Worshippers knelt, heads bowed, not just to God but to light made holy by passing through human craft. And yet, life within Cathedral was not only prayer. Children scampered inside aisles after lessons, giggling softly before stern gaze guided them back to silence. Merchants sealed contracts beneath carved saints, believing divine witness secured honesty. Midwives brought newborns to font, water glimmering like silver under candle gleam, names whispered into eternity. Bells told weddings that filled space with laughter and promise. They told funerals where sobbing echoed like rain on slate. In joys and sorrows, Cathedral became cradle and grave of human feeling. Time's slow river wore gently at stone edges. Rain polished steps. Pilgrims' feet carved shallow curve in threshold. Iron hinges on great doors developed shine where countless palms pushed. Brass handles dulled where hopes clung. Choir stalls darkened where monks rested elbows across generations. Nothing remained untouched. Everything bore fingerprints of life. There came ages of quiet prosperity, wheat fields heavy, markets loud with trade, festivals bright with banners fluttering like sparrows in summer wind. Cathedral rang with fullness then. Fine incense lifted in golden clouds, churchwardens polished candlesticks until sunrise doubled in gleaming brass. Wealthy patrons commissioned altar pieces gilded in gold leaf, saints painted with careful reverence. Tapestries hung along cold stone, warming walls like memory warms aging heart. Cathedrals are not immune to earthly joy. They cradle it gently, knowing such brightness passes quickly. Yet not all centuries were soft. War swept across kingdoms, banners burned, men marched. Soldiers slept in nave, armor clinking, field mud drying in cracks between stones where incense once burned. Arrows clattered on floor, prayers entwined with fear. Torchlight flickered on faces carved long ago, and vaults sang not with him, but with weary groans of world at war. Still Cathedral endured. It did not judge turmoil, it held those who fought and those who prayed alike. Later, storms of thought came, reformers shouting in market squares, calling for new faith, new worship. Some cathedrals lost statues, saints toppled by zeal like trees felled in sudden gale. Glass shattered, color bleeding into dust. Choir books burned in squares, altars stripped bare, but even then stone sighed and waited. For truth deeper than doctrine beats through cathedral walls. Faith shifts shape like cloud, yet sky remains. So Cathedral remained, cracked but watching, just as mountains watch storms and survive. When plague returned in later age, more fierce than before, streets fell silent. Bells tolled not for celebration, but for death too numerous to name. Incense smoke rose from censers swung by trembling priests, drifting through empty aisles heavy with sorrow thick as winter fog. Windows glowed in stillness, each panel a reminder that light persists even when footsteps vanish. Outside, carts creaked with loss. Inside, candles glimmered faint, defiant embers of hope. Cathedrals do not turn away from suffering, they absorb it, holding grief like lamp holds flame, steady against wind. Eventually, light returned. Children's cries echoed once more, merchants spread cloth on market boards, choirs rehearsed in soft mourning. Life flowed back through doors like river through thawed valley. Some windows replaced where grief shattered them, some statues mended, some altars rebuilt. Cracks filled, scars smoothed, yet Cathedral remembered. It remembered because stone holds memory more faithfully than parchment. As centuries advanced, science blossomed. Mathematicians marveled at geometry embedded in ribs and arches. Astronomers traced stars through rose windows, noting sacred alignment with heavens. Builders of New Age studied ancient carpentry joints, humble admiration in every touch. What was once seen as miracle grew understood as mastery, but understanding did not diminish wonder, it deepened it. Truth unveiled only made Cathedral more wondrous, for the divine often hides in skill of mortal hands. Scholars entered with notebooks and measured vault span, buttress curve, window proportion. Artists painted watercolor of facade bathed in afternoon gold. Musicians placed stands and played soft chords that slid across pillar lines like silk over marble. Poetry written beneath stained glass murmured like wind through reeds. And tourists came, faces upturned, hearts unexpectedly hushed despite noise of world outside. They removed hats, stilled voices, and let stone speak. In some ages roofs faltered, beams weakened, mortar crumbled. Craftsmen returned, like physicians tending ancient patient with steady love. They climbed scaffolds their ancestors once climbed, chiseled stone their forebears once touched. They did not rebuild as if creating new, they repaired as if caring for elder. Dust rose again, ropes tightened again, hands steadied weight again. Cathedral renewed breath through human devotion once more. Time whispered through broken edges and restored pinnacles. Children traced names cut centuries earlier, feeling grooves like heartbeat of history. Lovers wed beneath vaults that had witnessed vows thousands of times before. Soldiers lit small candles before journey to battlefields unknown. Pilgrims shuffled in slippers, arthritic hands gripping wooden canes, tears falling like dew as they looked upon windows whose radiance healed old wounds. Even unbelievers found quiet solace under stone canopy, discovering reverence need not wear creed to enter sacred space. And as centuries marched toward present, Cathedral met new world of iron and lines, of glass not colored by saintly fire but clear and cold. Streets filled with machines, skies buzzed with engines. Yet within Cathedral, candlelight still flickered, bells still called evening prayer, choir still rehearsed hymns that rose to vault like incense lifted by unseen cherubs. Tourists now clicked photographs, guides whispered dates, scholars debated original mason's geometry. But when last visitor left at dusk, silence returned, ancient, full, warm. Light from street lamps leaked through tracery in pale gold, moonlight etched silver rivers along floor. The building rested, breathing centuries in quiet pulse. You could almost hear prayer woven between stones, like breath between heartbeats in sleeping child. Cathedral waited, as it always had, for next dawn, next generation, next soul seeking shelter from storm of life. And so the legacy endured, not merely as stone marvel, but as testament to human longing for meaning deeper than soil and sky. Cathedrals stand because people once believed beauty worthy of lifetime. They stand because labor of humble hands can lift soul toward eternity. They stand because each age chooses, again and again, not to forget. At times, tourists place palms on pillars and feel warmth lingering from day's sun. But those who listen deeper feel more. Whisper of centuries in grain of stone, sigh of generations who knelt here, murmur of prayers breathed by mouths now dust. Touch is not of rock but of memory. Cathedral does not speak in voice, it speaks in presence. Spire points still skyward, defiant against time's erosion, as if reminding stars that Earth too can hold something eternal. Wind sweeps around pinnacles, humming low, as though singing harmony with ancient choirs. Dawn still paints nave in gold, dusk still drapes it in violet and blue. Bells still shake air on feast mornings, organs still tremble walls with thunder-soft reverence. Children still chase pigeons in square outside but hush stepping inside, instinct unchanged across centuries. In every era, Cathedral remains sanctuary, not only from weather, but from haste, noise, forgetting. It reminds world that greatness is not loud, that endurance is not forceful, that devotion needs no witness to matter. It stands for those who built, those who prayed, those who dreamed, those yet unborn who will walk here someday and find silence speaking louder than sermon. For cathedrals, even when stone cracks, when generations sleep in earth, when wars scar fields and storms batter heights, do not truly fall. They live in memory as vividly as in mortar. They live in hearts of towns that sheltered them. They live in hands of craftspeople restoring them. They live in strangers who whisper beautiful without knowing why tears rise. Stone, wood, glass, these are bones. Devotion, that is life. And as long as one candle burns, one hymn echoes, one footstep crosses threshold with reverence, Cathedral breathes. A beacon through ages, a cradle for hope. A reminder that the hands of mortals, trembling with uncertainty, can build eternity if guided by love. So it stands patient, luminous, ancient, alive, and history kneels before it, humbled. Night settles softly over the ancient stones, a velvet hush embracing buttress and bell, pillar and vaulted rib. The cathedral stands in twilight calm, neither young nor old, but eternal in the breath between stars and earth. Moonlight weaves through tracery like silver thread pulled gently through linen, touching carved saints and quiet chapels with a cold grace tender as fingertip on sleeping brow. Here, in this stillness, one can feel centuries exhaling, long labor laid to rest, devotion distilled into silence that glimmers like dew before dawn. The scaffolds have vanished. The hammers are quiet. Where once ropes creaked and chisels rang like distant bells across the morning fields, only wind moves now, brushing past stone as though reading scripture written in its grain. Grass grows at the feet of flying buttresses, soft and yielding where once heavy feet marched. Sparrows bow on choir roof, wings tucked in peaceful vigil. The building no longer rises, it breathes. A mountain shaped by mortal hands, yet untouched by haste, full of presence vast and gentle as prayer whispering across empty nave. Inside, night gathers in chapels, settling thick as incense. The great height above holds darkness like chalice holds wine, deep, still, sacred. Candles rest unlit. Choir stalls sleep in shadows, polished by devotion long past. Beneath ribbed vault, shafts of moon slip through stained glass, quiet fragments of pale blue and frost-white falling across flagstone in broken pools. Even the painted saints seem to dream. Time itself grows soft here, not ended, but slowed to heartbeat hush as though cathedral and night confer in secret tongue. And in that quiet, something remains, not sound, not motion, but memory made almost living. The echo of footsteps lingers, faint as dust, where men once climbed toward sky with chisel and hope. The breath of prayer lingers, though lips that spoke it lie forgotten beneath earth warmed by sun. The hum of industry, the laughter shared atop scaffolds, the fear when arch first tested gravity, the trembling joy when vault closed against heaven, all linger like notes of old hymn dissolving into air long after final chord. If one listens deeply, they might imagine the past stirring. A boy carrying water, bare feet slapping frost-kissed plank. A mason running calloused thumb along curve of fresh-cut stone, eyes bright with pride. A widow lighting candle for husband who never saw nave complete. Choir boys whispering Latin before noon bell. Bells ringing to mark feast day when spire first crowned sky. These lives, brief in flesh, endure in spirit, etched into mortar like breath caught between pages of ancient psalter. The cathedral is not only monument, it is memory housed in stone, every block lifted by hands rough with harvest toil, every arch cut with measures traced from stars, every sculpture kissed by chisel worn smooth by faithful palm, every pane of glass fired in furnace fed by wood gathered from forest edge. It remembers not only saints and kings, but common souls who offered crumb, coin, thread, prayer. Their devotion binds each stone more firmly than iron clamps ever could. In this hush, the building becomes more than architecture. It is a vessel for longing, a cradle for grief, a lantern cupping light so tender it refuses to die. Generation after generation sought refuge beneath its ribs. War-worn soldiers laying blades before altar, mothers holding fevered children praying for gentle dawn, lovers exchanging vows under rose-lit glow as organs sighed low behind their quiet joy. Death walked here, yes, but so did hope, tireless and soft as dawn gathering behind horizon. Outside, the village sleeps. Cottages huddle like sheep around Shepherd Tower. River murmurs beneath pale moon, carrying reflections downstream like drifting prayers. Trees sway, leaves whispering a language older than masonry, yet kin to it, both born from patience, both reaching upward. Horses breathe in stable gloom, warm steam rising into rafters. A dog stirs, then settles again. Life rests, but presence remains, breath in the dark, heartbeat in stone. The builders are gone, dust returned to earth that fed them. Their laughter has quieted, their fears dissolved, their triumphs folded into history like linens stored in cedar. Yet they endure. For every arch curve is their memory held aloft, every window glimmer their dream still burning, every bell peal their voice raised long after bones fell silent. Eternity did not forget them. It holds them as cathedral holds silence, reverently, lovingly, without need for name. And still, morning will return. Dawn will spill gold through stained glass once more, igniting saints' faces with warmth renewed as if first day ever dawned. Sun will stretch fingers across aisles chilled by night, warming stone like gentle hand, waking slumbering child. Bells will ring, scattering night shadows into corners where they curl content, knowing they too belong to sacred rhythm. Visitors will step inside with awe hushed on lips. Some will kneel, some simply breathe deeper, some unknowingly carry fragment of quiet home in chest like pocketed relic. For Cathedral is not relic of past, it is living him. It stands not to remember alone, but to remind. That beauty born from patience outlives ambition born from haste. That hands working in humility can build eternity more surely than swords raised in pride. That faith, whether in God, in purpose, or in love, makes stone weightless, turning earth into staircase toward quiet heaven. In final quiet of night, star glimmers above spire, lone sentinel in pale sky. Stone hearts within walls rest without fear, knowing dawn will rise, knowing people will gather again, knowing time will walk softly here, not as enemy but as companion. For what is this place, if not meeting point of mortal and eternal? Where footsteps fade, but intention lingers like fragrance of incense long after flame dies. A cathedral never ends. Not in stone and not in soul. It stands as testament that human spirit, fragile as candle flame, can shine so fiercely it outlives seasons, kingdoms, centuries. And as long as one heart enters seeking gentleness, one voice whispers prayer, one child stares upward in wonder, it will remain alive, breathing with grace carved from light and labor. The night holds the cathedral like mother holds sleeping child. The world breathes slow. And in the silence, one truth rests sure and steady. What we build in devotion never truly fades. It settles into time like dawn into sky, quiet, radiant, unbroken. Forever rising, forever at peace. Stone may forget the hands that raised it, yet it remembers every prayer whispered beneath its arches. For where walls rise toward heaven, the human spirit learns it was never bound to earth.